This kid awakened in a small village, landing the rarest class in the entire world, the necromancer. But since he's still too young, he hasn't trained enough to evolve his powers yet. For now, he's just living a normal life hanging out with his friends. Alec, our main character, was raised by his grandpa, and even though he's just a kid, everyone treats him like an adult. He even sits in on important meetings with the other adults in the village. Today, the meeting was all about the upcoming festival, and they were splitting up the responsibilities among everyone. Alec got assigned the job of giving the congratulatory speech at the festival, so he headed straight to the shop to pick up the outfit he needed for the big speech. While he was changing clothes, his friend Mia showed up at the store, asking if he had a minute to talk. Alec and Mia went for a stroll through the forest, but it was dead silent, like there was an invisible wall between them. She thought about it, and said she'd only talk to him after his speech. Then she turned around and went home. Watching her leave, he realized just how much this girl actually meant to him. He even started thinking she might be his future wife. But he still had that dream of becoming an adventurer and was just waiting to turn 15 so he could explore the world beyond the village. When he got home late, his grandpa was waiting right at the door, asking if Alec was worried about something, teasing him about being in love with Mia. Alec got all embarrassed and went inside with his grandpa. The next day, he met up with his friends to welcome the person he'd been waiting for, Mr. Kane, the traveling bard, the man who travels the globe telling stories about everything he's seen. Alec had been waiting ages for this, believing Kane was his key to becoming an adventurer. Curious, he asked about the news from the outside world. Kane told him that East Atlantis is currently at peace, and the Haida kingdom to the north is quiet too. Alec asked who he thought the Kars Empire was planning to attack. The answer was that Atlantis seemed like the most likely target. The kid noted that this war really depends on whether the Pendragon Kingdom intervenes or not. He felt like he needed to start training to get stronger, just in case war reached his village. Later on at the festival, Alec gave his big congratulatory speech, and everyone cheered loudly for his inspiring words. Right after that, Mia showed up, quietly calling him over, and congratulated him, saying his speech was beautiful. But then, out of nowhere, the mood got heavy again, and she asked if he was planning to leave the village. He confirms that he plans to travel the entire world. Then she hits him with an unexpected request, asking if she can tag along. He warns her that it's dangerous out there, filled with people who have bad intentions. But even after hearing all that, she was still determined to go with him. Reaching out his hand, Alec agrees to let her come along, even though he knows the risks. A year passed, and Alec was busy training his magic with his grandfather, getting ready to face the outside world. To truly become a dark mage, he needed to master the 4 elements: water, fire, earth, and air. 3 months later, he had already boosted all his magical levels significantly. While walking through the forest, he noticed something different about the path, spotting a bush in the middle of the road that definitely wasn't there before. Getting closer, he saw a foot sticking right out of the foliage. Suddenly, a woman popped out from the bushes. She introduced herself as Lily, an elf. Alec introduced himself and mentioned he was from Kettle Village. Turns out, Lily actually knows Alec's grandfather, and she asked to be taken to see him immediately. Upon arriving at the house, she finally reunited with Gale after 10 long years, leaving him totally shocked by her sudden appearance. Lily bragged that she had managed to reach level 38 and asked him what his current level was. He replied that as a sage, he was sitting at level 50, which left her feeling awkward since he had surpassed the level cap. Since she was already there, he asked if she could train the village kids for a while. She hesitated a bit at first, but soon accepted his request. She asked about Alec's current stats, and found out his levels were incredibly high for someone his age. A few days later, when training day finally arrived, Alec, Mia, and Jilly were eager to see what kind of training awaited them. When they got there, they found a massive golem and everyone was terrified. Lily simply announced that this monster was their training partner. But shifting from fear to excitement, they charged right at the golem. Alec kicks things off by activating his mobility boost, while Jilly fires off an arrow right away, aiming to hit the golem and immobilize it instantly. Following up fast, Alec unleashes a long-range attack, absolutely shattering the golem into pieces. Lily wasn't expecting them to be that good, but she warned them that their next opponent would be way tougher. 3 months later, they were all having dinner over at Grandpa Gale's place. While they were eating and chatting about their training progress, someone started banging frantically on the front door. A village hunter apologized for interrupting so late, but he had urgent news. A wyvern dragon had been spotted in the northern forest. Lily immediately declared that the timing was perfect. The hunter thought she was going to help, but she had other plans in mind. She announced that the ones taking down this beast would be the 3 kids, Alec, Mia, and Jilly. Alec went straight to tell Mia and Jilly, leaving them completely shocked. He also broke the news that Grandpa had actually agreed to her request. Now that the mission was set, they spent the whole night plotting their strategy to take down the wyvern. The next morning, the day of their new training challenge had arrived. Lily warned them the dragon was close and told them to keep quiet as they approached. When they got to the spot, there it was, fast asleep. Jilly immediately started positioning himself at a distance, while Alec headed straight toward the beast, taking advantage of the distraction to launch his first attack. The enraged dragon charged right at Alec, but he was ready for it and unleashed his firestorm ability, forcing the dragon to retreat and fly as high as possible. The kids were expecting that move, so Jilly seized the moment and rained arrows down on the dragon. Alec was pumped that everything was going to plan, but the dragon had a nasty surprise waiting for him. Suddenly he heard Mia screaming in the background. A second dragon had appeared out of nowhere, catching them all off guard. Lily jumped in just in time to save Mia, but she ended up getting hit by the second wyvern herself. She uses her power to blast the dragon away, but she realized she couldn't move because the dragon's tail was coated in paralyzing poison. Alec screamed for Mia to cast an anti-paralysis spell, but she was completely frozen in fear. Seeing that Mia was too terrified to act, Alec told Jilly he was going in to help Lily. But right after that, Jilly got hit too, leaving Alec as the last one standing. Furious and desperate, he decided to give it everything he had to survive. He chugged the very last potion he had left, cast a spell to trap the dragon in place, and then triggered a magic that opened up a massive sinkhole, sending the dragon plummeting deep underground. Just when it looked like it was over, the dragon crawled back to the surface. Even though he was totally drained, Alec fired off an ice spear. But the dragon was so strong, it just shattered the spell and calmly advanced toward him for the kill. Alec lay there on the ground, basically defeated and ready to die. But the moment the dragon was about to eat him, he realized he wasn't ready to go yet, so he pulled strength from the depths of his soul and launched one final spell at the beast. With its chest completely pierced, the dragon was finally defeated. Once the paralysis effect wore off, Lily rushed over and found Alec passed out on the ground. Against all odds, Alec had taken down the dragon all by himself. Heading back to the village, Lily realized she needs to give it her all to train this next generation of heroes to their absolute limit. Since then, about a year had passed after the subjugation of the wyvern. As soon as Alec got an advanced profession, it was time for Lily to leave and seek to participate in the competition to become queen. She mentioned that she would return to visit and remembered that the boy probably wouldn't even be there as he would also be going on a journey. The two said their goodbyes and parted ways. In addition to becoming a sage, Alec obtained the alchemist class to learn magic and pharmacology from his grandfather. Successfully, the protagonist received approvals from Guile on his magical mixtures. Thanks to his efforts, he could apply his skills in practice and create new medicines. In the midst of his studies, Alec remembered that he had a meeting at 6 in the evening. It was related to the harvest festival, and therefore he should visit the village leader. Despite hearing this, the sage was a bit too tired to leave the house, and he apologized by asking his grandson to go to the meeting by himself this time. As usual, they held the assembly and discussed the preparations for the year. Upon returning home, Alec greeted his grandfather and reported that everything was organized. It seemed that Cain would be visiting the village this year as well. There were still other matters to resolve, such as some young people who were going to leave the village to become adventurers in the royal capital. As the protagonist spoke, he gradually noticed that his grandfather had stopped responding. When he approached the bed, he tried to check if he was still awake. The next day, Dial's burial was held alongside everyone from the village. Alec cried alone in front of the grave, and Mia ran to hug him in an attempt to comfort him. After some time together, Jilly also approached to talk. The boy mentioned that his mother made dinner and worried about his friends since he hadn't eaten anything. Even though Alec seemed exhausted, his friends took him back home. 7 more years passed, and it would only take another 3 months for Alec to turn 15. He still conducted his chemical experiments as usual and finished his daily quota. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door and asked for permission to enter. It was Mia who came to bring a snack to the protagonist and started setting the table. As the protagonist finished his work, the girl wanted to discuss the preparations for the trip a little later. She thought a lot about it, but still wasn't sure what they should take. Alec mentioned that he would make travel gear, so his friend would only need to bring a change of clothes. He could prepare several things on his own with his alchemy, but they would have to buy others along the way, which was good. It even made Mia consider learning alchemy too, but the protagonist advised against it, as it would take too much time. In that, Alec asked if Anna's training was progressing. The girl was Mia's little sister and had learned to cure poison the day before, even though she was only 7 years old. Despite being similar, the younger girl hated Alec for some reason. A little later, Jilly also appeared at the house, having become a level 42 hunter. He brought a visitor and asked if it was a good time to talk. The visitor apologized and asked for permission to arrive at such a busy hour. There were 2 people who entered Alec's house, leaving him confused as he didn't know them. As soon as the visitors learned that this was the house of the sage Guile, The girl felt relieved and said she wanted to talk for a moment. Alec was surprised because he didn't often receive people at home. Therefore, he apologized for not being able to offer more hospitality than this, although the girl didn't mind. She wanted to know where Guile would be, and the protagonist tells that his grandfather passed away several years before. The visitors were caught by surprise and question who succeeded him. Alec replies that there was never a successor, but he took his place as the pharmacist. This was a problem for the visitors, and one of them asks about the equipment used by the former sage. The protagonist tenses up, wondering what exactly they wanted. Then, he lies to the visitors that he burned his staff and robe at the funeral. This left the knight Chris furious at the insolence of what they had done. The girl reprimands the knight and apologizes for her attendant's bad behavior. However, this was a problem considering they lost both Guile and his equipment. Finally, Alec introduced himself after the girl asked for his name. The girl apologizes as they were unable to give their names at the moment. Still, she offers the chance for the protagonist to work alongside her. Thanking the offer, Alec politely declines and explains that he intended to leave on a journey in 3 months. It was indeed a pity for the girl, and she stands up to leave, offering her hand to shake his. Even Chris was shocked by this greeting, and Alec mirrored his surprised reaction. After a moment, they shake hands and the visitors leave. At that moment, Joey approached to talk. He mentions that the woman, along with her attendant, brought other knights. 2 were at the entrance of the village and 1 near the house, all ready to act. This made Alec consider that this visitor might be from the royal family. After all, knights were a profession acquired by swordsmen at level 50, and there were few in this world. The protagonist tells his friend what the visitors wanted and suggests they go speak with Billy, the village leader. Julie agreed that they should take care of security next time and would inform his father about it as well. Although Alec felt that the atmosphere around his friend had changed a lot since they were young, he couldn't say that out loud. Perhaps this change happened because he had been trained by William for many years. Joey mentioned he was going to leave, to which the protagonist mentioned he had baked a pie the other day and decided to offer it as a gift to his friend. The offer immediately made him turn around, all happy, and realizing he was acting like a child, the young man turned red with embarrassment. In the end, this made Alec smile because inside that young man was still the same one he had met. Meanwhile, a man listened to the report that the Golden Princess had made a move. It seemed she went to ask for help from the retired sage of her country. However, all indications were that this sage in question was dead. The man who received the news was shocked that this was true. Then, he began to laugh quite loudly. He didn't know what the princess intended to do with the sage, but who knows, they could take the opportunity to make a move. Thus, he ordered to destroy everything in the village, from the sage's legacy to the princess's plan. In the meantime, Alec took advantage of the other morning to start a harvest of materials. It had been a week since the surprise visit, and since then he felt that something strange was going to happen. For now, he would make his return to the village earlier to eat at Mia's house. Suddenly, he hears birds flying in a panic and wonders what happened. Having a bad feeling about it, the protagonist decides to hurry back to the village. Alec was going to set his belongings aside and check the village. That was when he noticed a group of people forcing open a door, and at that moment, he questions what those 3 were trying to do, invading his house. The hooded figure smiled upon seeing Alec's equipment and knew it must be a gift from the sage. Instead of answering his questions, the knights rushed to attack the protagonist. In that moment, he unleashed magic and hit the men's legs, causing them to fall. The hooded mage understood that this young man must be the sage's disciple to be able to manipulate so many elements at such a young age. Being the case, he would show no mercy and summoned a griffin for combat. Faced with this monster, Alec knew that this summoner would be a problem. He shot a wall of fire and kept the griffin's claws from hitting him. In theory, the summoned creature would fight on the front lines, while its summoner would provide support from the back. In other words, it was no different from a solo battle against 2 people. The mages clashed 2 identical spells, but his opponent was clearly stronger. Seeing that Alec was holding his ground, the mage laughed and tried another method of attack. He unleashed a cloud of poison, forcing Alec to jump away. At the same opportunity, the griffin leaped to strike him on the head, forcing Alec to dodge and use another lightning spell. With that, the summoning was successfully defeated, and the protagonist had the chance to heal. Alec was at a disadvantage in numbers and strength, but perhaps there was a chance to turn the tables. It was a fact that his opponent's impression was that he was facing a mere dark mage. But Alec was capable of using white magic as well as sage magic. In the meantime, he healed the poison and boosted his willpower. The summoner laughed because his opponent had managed to get this far, but there was still much at stake. He fired a fire spell and Alec defended himself using a magical barrier. Then, he used healing magic and doubled his magical power before falling to his knees. It was his act to make his opponent lower his guard and not boast. Finally, the mage commanded his griffin to finish him off, and that was the right moment for the protagonist to act. With his staff, he fired a blinding spell and avoided the other mage's attacks. The summoner just froze in place, surprised that Alec was able to ignore each of his attacks, until he was finally pressured by the ice magic shots and knocked down. The mage could hardly believe he had actually faced a sage, and he began to laugh because this outcome was beyond his expectations. With the battle over, Alec questioned what their purpose was in invading his home, and the man revealed that it was to seek Dial's inheritance, the sage's stone. It was supposed to be an item that sages use to learn extra skills. To be precise, it was a key item that generates quests, allowing the player to learn new techniques. Alec had his grandfather's belongings, but he didn't remember such an item existing. If someone possesses the sage's stone, they will be able to uncover the truth about this world. The protagonist was confused because the mage in front of him was just a mere summoner. Thus, it wasn't as if he would be able to use the stone even if he had it. Or perhaps he didn't even know about this detail. Maybe there was someone else who wanted the stone instead. At that moment, the summoner commented that Alec should be elsewhere instead of wasting time here. Maybe he could check how the village was doing now. When he least expected it, there was smoke rising from among the trees. Alec questioned what was happening for them to attack the village out of nowhere, and the mage revealed that the sage's stone was a secondary objective. The main goal was to thwart the princess's plans and the seed she planted. They could not allow anyone to know about their activities. It was their job to trample everything that was sown by that woman. These words left the protagonist furious because they involved several innocents in the process. Suddenly, the summoner drew a scroll that began to glow. He was going to leave now, but someday he would seek revenge for this battle. Before Alec could do anything, the mage disappeared with a teleportation scroll. That frustrated him because he lost his chance to gather more information. All this talk was to make him waste time and allow the griffin to break free. And then the monster killed its knights to silence them as well. Putting that situation aside, Alec ran desperately to the village. He was worried about Mia and what she might be getting involved in. When the protagonist arrived, he was faced with a horrific scene of destruction. He knocked down one of the knights and ran after his two friends. The houses were on fire and several corpses lay on the ground. In the midst of the chaos, he finally found Jilly, who was equally confused after just returning from his hunt. Alec offered healing to his friend so they could run and meet Mia. The two worked together to defeat the knights and mages in their path, until they found the chief's house completely destroyed, with several of them shot with arrows in their backs. Tom and Billy were targets, and Alec would not forgive these invaders for such wickedness. The two continued running, searching for more survivors, and they ended up coming across the destroyed fields, as well as places where friends spent their time together in childhood. It was then that Jilly shouted, alerting that Mia's house was on fire. The girl herself was pressed against the door after being hit by several arrows. The two attacked the knights and knocked their weapons away. While Jilly dealt with the opponents, the protagonist ran to check on his friend's condition. The girl smiled in relief upon seeing Alec coming to help, and of course, just at that moment, a new arrow struck her right in the chest. Then, Mia's body fell to the ground as Alec froze in shock. He ran to try to save her while Jilly wondered where that attack had come from. The protagonist pulls out the arrow and prepares to heal the girl, trying to stop the bleeding. But no matter how much he uses his powers, her wounds do not close. Her lungs were intact. An injury like that should be quite easy. The healing magic could restore wounds up to a limit, but if the damage exceeded that, the power was ineffective. In other words, it was impossible to heal a person who was already dead. Still, Alec was a sage, and sages should be able to revive people with magic. For such a feat, it was necessary to be at level 35, a level far too high to reach now. The protagonist had barely reached level 10 recently, and this made him remember his grandfather's words. Since he was a child, Billy always wanted his grandson to become a sage. As the boy wanted to become a necromancer, it should be possible to delay his task as a sage. Or so he thought, and now that thought made Alec of the future deeply regret. After a long moment, he remembers that they were still in the middle of battle. Jilly turned around, not understanding what had happened to his friend or Mia's state. He saw Alec approaching, using spell after spell in succession. Above all, he was wielding an enchanted weapon, which surprised the hunter. Without any hesitation, the mage begins to attack each of his opponents, but instead of casting magical spells, it was through brute force. Jilly watched these cruel attacks in disbelief, wanting to calm his furious friend, but unable to step into the chaos. At this rate, the mage would use up all his mana and wear himself out. Still, Alec could not stop. The fact that he had lost Mia forever frustrated him to the point of wanting to keep taking down everyone he saw in front of him. The knights were confused about what was happening and called for their commander. After a while, the head of the knights arrived to see why his men were falling. The man laughed upon realizing it was all because of a simple brat. Immediately, Alec noticed that the commander was using magical equipment and was a sword-wielding mage. As expected, his spell shots did not work. So instead, the protagonist doubled his magic and cast a death spell. As soon as the captain fell, his subordinates were left confused about what had happened, and they despaired because this sage in front of them was a true monster. But no matter how much they begged, Alec would not offer mercy. His goal was to take down as many men as possible. All those who had destroyed his village should be defeated by his own hands. When the battle ended, only a great and oppressive silence remained. It was ironic that Alec could not use magic to revive, but could cause even more deaths. Finally, he approached Mia's body, and soon Jilly came closer as well. He spent his time looking around the village, but there were no other survivors. This made him wonder what they should do from then on. The sun would set soon, and they needed to find food and a place to sleep. However, these words only angered Alec. After all, his friend acted far too calmly even in these circumstances. He gestured for him to look around at the state of the village. Nothing else remained for the two. Even after everything, the hunter was capable of being cruel and acting as if nothing had happened. It seemed that after all, only Mia had been important in his eyes. Despite these accusations, Joe calmly replied that Alec was not the only one suffering. He lost his parents and friends. If he were alone, he would probably react the same way. But instead, it was the protagonist who was horrified, and seeing him in that state made Jilly strong to support him. Finally, Alec took a deep breath and fell to his knees, only able to cry endlessly. Since then, he did not know how much time had passed. His friend went out to look for food, and even so, Alec could only curl up, depressed. For some reason, his body did not obey his commands. Despite having trained hard, he was unable to save anyone when it mattered most. Death was loneliness, loneliness was misery and emptiness. Having died once in the past, Alec understood this feeling well. After all, he had failed Mia when she needed him the most. While he thought to himself, suddenly he felt something touch him, like a hand. But when he looked around, he was perfectly alone. Again, that sensation passed through Alec. It felt like something floating. When someone becomes a necromancer, it is said they can use unique abilities, and they depend on the person. The power that would be in the protagonist's hands was called talking to the dead. If he could level up and change his profession, he would be able to perfect it. There was still something Alec would be able to do, even if it was insignificant. That's why he follows that kind of spirit into the house and climbs the stairs. In the end, he was guided towards Mia's room and towards the wardrobe. When Jilly returned with the food, he didn't find his friend outside. Upon entering the house and calling for him, he soon met Alec. The boy climbed up, asking why the mage had gone up, and was also guided to Mia's room. When they opened the wardrobe doors, they found an unbelievable scene. It seemed that the girl was just sleeping, but it was a true relief. After all, they found a survivor besides themselves, and it was Mia's little sister, Anna. Apparently, Mia had put her life at risk to protect her. It was because of this that the girl stayed outside, facing the knights on her own. She was a strong and brave woman, unlike Alec. The next day, Jilly returned after stepping out for a moment. The hunter tried to check the village, and as imagined, with no people around, it would take some time for the rescue to arrive there. Additionally, he managed to get some necessary equipment and clothes for Anna. Alec thanked him and asked the boy to go wake the girl up. The girl was greeted with a smile and breakfast, but she didn't seem happy at all. She asked how she ended up in Alec's house and where her older sister was. This made the protagonist hesitate before saying he would explain things after eating. Then, he told her that the village was attacked by mysterious people the day before. Anna agreed that she knew about this because Mia had asked her to hide in the wardrobe. Finally, the mage revealed that only the three of them survived, but everyone else had died. Even their parents, the village chief and her sister, were killed. The girl screamed in disbelief. After all, she had always heard that Alec was strong and would save them when needed. And as expected, Anna questioned why he hadn't done that. In response, all the protagonist could say was that he was too weak. If he had been a little stronger, then Mia and others might still be alive. He went so far as to partially blame Mia and Anna too, judging that things would have been different if they had been stronger. Jilly reprimanded him for his behavior, to which the girl trembled in frustration upon hearing that weakness was a bad thing. Although her hunter friend tried to stop that morbid conversation from continuing, Alec interrupted him. Because the truth of this world was that the weak were overcome by the strong. In that case, Anna said they should just become strong from then on. She didn't want to be surpassed by anyone ever again and asked them to help her on this path. Power, authority, wealth, none of that was a privilege or within the reach of the weak. In fact, all of that was lacking for them. That's why, so they wouldn't lose other people they loved, they needed to strengthen themselves. The protagonist agreed with the little girl's request and promised they would become stronger together. After that, they finished their last meal in the village, and then they gathered their belongings with the necessary equipment, leaving their hometown for an unknown place. The three headed north into the forest, where Alec began to teach Anna to better use her magic. By letting a slime stick to her body, the mage allowed the girl to attack whenever she wanted. Even nervous, she shot fire arrows and successfully hit the slime. However, the monster attacked her instead, and Alec intervened. The boy explained that it was thanks to the equipment his grandfather left behind when he was still an adventurer, and he praised her for being able to cast magic so well on her first day. Since then, Anna had been learning dark magic with the protagonist's help. Instead of white magic, which focuses on restoration, her goal was to become stronger, so dark magic was more suitable. This training pace reminded Alec of his times learning from the old sage. For now, they finished the day's practice so as not to exhaust the new student. Since they left the village, the girl called Alec Master. Although her distant attitude saddened him, the protagonist decided to respect her choices. During the night, Jilly asked Alec where they would be going this time. The destination was the merchant city of Harbor, which was south of the village, and they would arrive in 2 weeks. The answer surprised the hunter, as he thought they would be heading to the royal capital. However, the mage wanted to avoid contact with the royal family as much as possible, but that was a secret he would keep to himself. Instead, Alec explained that it would be better to go to a place with a port to travel. As soon as they arrived in the city, they could go to the guild and get cards for the three of them. Anna was confused about the conversation, and they explained what it was about. Their names and country were marked on a registration card, allowing them to travel across the country. This would also make it easier if they wanted to travel to other countries. Since the village no longer existed, their birthplace was unknown. The card would be quite useful for acquiring personal belongings, and it was good to form a clan afterward. In general, it was possible to receive requests from the guild, so Jilly was confused about why Alec wanted a guild too. The protagonist explains that with a clan, they would have a special residence and could accept difficult quests. Despite this, 3 more people would be needed to form a clan. When it was said that Anna couldn't take on high-level quests, the girl promised she would get stronger to fight alongside them. Alec saw no problem since he didn't intend to make her work beyond her limits. As everything seemed prepared, Jilly ended up agreeing to his proposal. 3 more days passed, and Anna's training continued. This time she tried to hit a goblin and missed badly, screaming in desperation when she became their target. The other 2 just watched her from a distance, letting her handle her intensive training. 2 more days passed, and the girl's progress became more and more obvious. It didn't take long for her to be able to defeat monsters on her own. Even so, besides using magic, Anna was clumsy with any other task. In the end, the girl could only apologize for being so bad. Alec wasn't angry with her for her failures. After all, it was her first time with certain things. In that moment, Anna asked if the protagonist was good at fishing when he was with Mia, and he reflected that they had promised in the past to adventure together. Not just fishing, but they hunted and gathered things in the forest for a week. When Lily was still with them, the trio of friends was the same age as Anna. During the conversation, Jilly alerted that the food was ready and took the opportunity to ask Alec something. He wanted to know what kind of professions were available when becoming a level 50 hunter. This was because the boy had killed many living beings in the village attack, and his level had increased significantly. The protagonist was caught off guard because it was possible to gain experience by taking human lives as well. Setting aside his momentary shock, he explained in detail what he knew. Jilly could become a sniper who perfects long-range shooting, or he could become a ranger, specialized in forest terrain combat. As a bonus, if he reached level 30 as a blacksmith, he could specialize in traps. If he leveled up as a thief, he could become a treasure hunter who collects items. That said, the protagonist asked what kind of skill his friend wanted. Although a sniper had high power, it wasn't very good with defenses. On the other hand, a ranger was suitable for group fights and solo, but outside the forest, it wouldn't be of much help. Considering the possibilities, Jilly preferred to become a sniper. If it was for survival, becoming a hunter was more than enough. However, he wanted to be strong to fight alongside Alec, and a sniper would be suitable. Finally, Anna thanked for the meal and decided to retire to sleep. The other 2 agreed, albeit a bit confused. A week after leaving the village, the girl learned to create barriers and protection. She asked her master what kind of monster they would deal with this time. In that, the protagonist said he asked Jilly to take care of a large orc, which scared her. The protagonist explained that orcs have great stamina, but are quite slow, so it would all depend on how careful she was. It didn't take long for the hunter to appear running with the monster following him. Then Alec guided his student into combat and made her shoot a fire arrow. Even a bit scared, Anna restrained the orc and sent even more attacks. It didn't take long for her to notice that he would break free very soon. Before that could happen, the girl sent a fire vortex, which wasn't bad from Alec's point of view, but not appropriate. The fire vortex trapped the target in a sphere of flames for 10 seconds, and its damage was slightly higher than the fire arrows. On the other hand, the mana consumption was 5 times greater to maintain it. Because of this, the orc broke free shortly after her spell and attacked the girl next. As Anna was unable to defend herself, Alec intervened with a lightning spell. With that, he defeated it with just one move, leaving the girl quite surprised. Then, the protagonist warned her about this carelessness related to the fire vortex. At that moment, they were fighting to become stronger, but it didn't always mean they would live to see the next day, so they should never underestimate their opponents. That said, Anna should always keep in mind a reserve of mana. Her mistake makes her apologize, but Alec wasn't angry or anything like that. The boy could tell she did her best, so she didn't have to worry and just use it to improve. During the night, the girl began to toss and turn in her sleep with a nightmare. She remembers when Mia asked her little sister to hide safely in the closet. No matter how much the girl called for Mia, she was left alone behind. In the midst of this anxiety, Alec came to check if Anna was okay. He realized that the training must have left her exhausted and went out to prepare some warm milk for her. Anna followed him and noticed that Alec had several items in his belongings. The protagonist explained that they were magical items, and he would keep them sealed when they arrived in the city. He created all of them with his own skill, as well as the tents and lanterns. The girl was surprised because her master could do so many things, and yet she felt weak and useless, unable to do or say anything. Even when Alec tried to deny those words, the girl shouted about how Mia was much better. If it were her sister, she would have been able to cook and fish properly and would never disturb others. She begged them not to abandon her even if she was so bad. Alec immediately affirmed that he would never do that because Anna was like his sister now. Despite this, the girl didn't believe him and stepped back, thinking she would eventually be discarded. Finally, Alec held her by the shoulders so they could look at each other. Even though Mia wasn't there, he would never abandon her and would always be by her side. He made this promise and hugged her, trying to comfort her. Alec felt like a complete idiot for never noticing how anxious the girl had been. From her point of view, Alec and Jilly were just her sister's friends, not part of her family or even her companions. The reason she was trying so hard every day was so she wouldn't be discarded. After that, Anna returned to her training and the trio's journey continued. 14 days after leaving the village, she became capable of defeating 3 orcs on her own. The protagonist asked her to leave the items she received from the monsters to Jilly. Although the boy didn't understand why she only called Alec brother, there was clearly a preference there. In any case, the girl became a level 15 black mage and was evolving very quickly, all because they hadn't been in very dangerous battles since then. Although it could also be because she gained space to focus on her improvement without worrying about anything else. Maybe at this rate, Anna could become a beautiful genius mage in the future. That night, the girl went to sleep first, and the other 2 stayed awake. Alec suggested to his friend that he should rest too, since he would take care of the watch in the forest this time. They would finally be arriving in the city the next day. The journey would soon end, and after that, they would start their life as adventurers. Inside his bag, there were several items left behind by his grandfather worth almost 6 million. This amount would normally be earned in a year, but it was a huge sum for someone living in a small village. To acquire high-class equipment, 5 to 6 million would be spent quickly. They had to look for more people for the clan, and they had to be frontline warriors. Living expenses would also be high. Maybe they should focus on strengthening themselves before getting equipment. Alec wanted to help his friend become a sniper quickly. And he also had to ask Anna what kind of profession she would like to acquire in the future. Even now, the protagonist wanted to become a necromancer, but it wouldn't be possible if he didn't have a unique item for the profession advancement. Besides that, something was distracting him out of the corner of his eye. Since the battle in the village, Alec had always felt a strong presence following him. Maybe it was the influence of his power to speak with the dead, but he was still unable to see or interact with that presence. He had always been able to sense things when he was young and noticed it getting stronger over time. Who knows, it could be because his level increased since then. Or maybe it was because he experienced more deaths than usual. In any case, he had to investigate the group that attacked the village. There were too many problems to deal with at once. The next day, when the group arrived in the city, they were allowed to enter. Anna and Joey were enchanted by the sight of such a vivid place. In contrast, Alec was suffering from how expensive the entry fee was. They had to make money as quickly as possible. Because of this, he suggested they go straight to the guild. Meanwhile, both Anna and Jilly were easily distracted and ignored him. In the end, the protagonist ended up following the two for a tour of the city. The port city of Volks was the largest in the Pendragon Kingdom and a center for trade. There were small islands near the port, and among them there were also dungeons. On the other hand, to the south, Volks shared a border with the Kaz Empire. Blood had been spilled many wars before between these two groups. As a result, Volks was also a fortress city surrounded by high walls. The group was at the northern gate, and the guild was in the southeast. The longest route was the main street. Noticing that his companions were excited about the city, Alec suggested they look at the ocean. He mentioned that it was to the east of the city, and they could see several boats as well. Jilly was surprised at how well-informed his friend was. It seemed like he had been there before. Nervous, the protagonist explained that he had heard about Hans, but it was his first time in the city. It was a relief to have given such an excuse because in the game, the city of Volks was the player's base, and he had unintentionally said a bit too much about it. Even so, compared to what he knew, there weren't many vendors and good items there. Setting aside his strangeness, the three headed to the port. Anna ate so much that she was full. In contrast, the hunter was still able to continue until he was stopped by an alert from Alec. They finally reached their main objective, the Mage Guild. They still needed to go to the Hunters Guild and the clan office as well, so they should do everything quickly. They entered the place and were greeted by the attendant at the counter. The protagonist said he would like to register alongside the girl next to him. Although young, Anna could use both black and white magic, and there certainly was no age limit to enter. The attendant agreed with his words, though she was concerned about the girl. Considering her expression, Alec said it would become clearer when they made the guild card. Finally, the woman offered the card for them to take. If one touched the magic circle behind the card with bare hands, they would be registered as the owner. Even though it was a small amount of money, each card contained mithril, which is why it cost 500 each. However, since it was their first registration, it would be free unless they registered again. With that, the two mages took their cards and touched the magic circles. The protagonist noticed that the professions also appeared, but not their skills. The attendant said that after registering they could return to the guild to submit requests. When Alec went to check if his card was ready, he noticed something that surprised him. This was because it was also showing his name before he reincarnated in this world. Despite this, it didn't seem like Anna was able to read this concerning detail. In that case, it should be fine to pass it on to the attendant, and so he did. But then she froze upon seeing that the boy was a level 15 black mage, stronger than herself. The girl apologized as she had exclaimed a bit too loudly. Alec asked the attendant to check Anna's card as well and requested that she stay quiet if possible. With that, the woman went to check the card in the back and let out a scream in the same way. Jilly even became worried, but Alec sighed because it was even more exaggerated than expected. Who rushed in a little later was the guildmaster, Watson. The man ran up to the protagonist and grabbed him by the shoulders, all flustered. He wanted to know who had taught him to reach such a high level. As soon as he heard that he was a disciple of Guile, the man almost fainted on the floor. He had heard that the sage adopted a child, but he had never known about a successor before. But even more shocking was Alec discovering that Watson was his grandfather's older brother. This was the first time he had heard anything about his family. In that case, the guildmaster wanted to talk a bit more with the protagonist. However, Alec apologized as they had just arrived and still had other places to go. Upon hearing this, Watson suggested he would write a recommendation letter to find a place to spend the night. He also noticed that the boy was wearing his older brother's equipment. It seemed that Guile had passed on his valuable belongings to his grandson, which was more than enough to confirm his identity. The man's kindness made Alec thank him for everything. While writing the recommendation letter, Watson sighed about his troublesome little brother. It would have been much better if he had kept in touch over time. Even Jilly ended up receiving a recommendation from the guildmaster to take to the Hunters Guild. There was also an inn nearby, and Watson would prepare rooms for the three of them. As soon as they left, Alec thanked his great-uncle for everything he had done for them. Still, the old man wanted to talk about various things with him later. As soon as the group withdrew, everyone agreed that the guildmaster was a good man. He was quite friendly and seemed unaware that Guile had passed away 7 years earlier. Alec wonders if the people in the village even knew about his grandfather's brother. In any case, the trio headed towards the Hunters Guild shortly after. The processes turned out to be the same, and they were even faster after presenting the recommendation letters. Jilly obtained his own guild card without any major issues. Finally, they arrived at the clan office where they could register as a house. The attendant quickly asked everyone to show their guild cards, but upon checking them, she asked if Alec was really an alchemist and wise as he claimed. The protagonist noticed that she didn't seem surprised, unlike other people before, or so he thought, because suddenly the attendant shouted upon seeing that he was Guile's disciple. This woman seemed to be another person familiar with Alec's grandfather. That's because Guile was the leader of the legendary clan White Ulu. It was a top-tier clan in Volks that successfully completed several difficult missions. Countless people formed clans admiring this man in the past. There isn't a citizen in this city who doesn't admire him. Even the attendant was a big fan. To think that the disciple of such a hero would form a clan made her feel like she was witnessing a new legend. Although Alec refused to have any pretensions about it, the woman mentioned that was exactly what a hero would say. In any case, there were no issues with their identification cards. There were other requirements to form a clan besides having 3 or more members. This was because it was a group that had to be recognized by the lord of the city to receive full support. The first requirement was, as expected, to have 3 or more members above level 15, which was a relief because Anna had trained enough to be worthy of the occupation. The second requirement was to pay the entry fee, which was 1 million in cash, and with that, they became a bronze rank clan. Jilly was curious about the clan house they could acquire, and the attendant revealed that houses were only available for silver rank and above. The ranks represent strength and how much they contribute to the city, going from bronze to silver, gold, mithril, and orichalcum. The group felt a bit disheartened because it would still take time to have a stable house, and although it was difficult to get out of the curve, these were 3 of the conditions to improve their rank position. To start, the clan leader needed to have an advanced profession. Next, they needed to contribute 1 million points and transfer it to the guild in cash. That said, Alec decided to pay the attendant right then to be promoted to silver rank. As the attendant was shocked, the protagonist worried that he had misunderstood. But the truth was that she was completely incredulous. This was because the new legendary descendant was plundering legends and jumping ranks. Adventurers were usually always broke, and getting 1 million was very difficult. Alec felt nervous because he was just using what he had available, but the rest of the group did not support his argument. After all, under other circumstances, they would have to improve their equipment with that money. And in the end, the protagonist didn't seem like a normal person. The attendant was all proud because the new hero made such a decision without hesitation, and she even apologized for interrupting the discussion but asked if the other 2 were members of the group. And if that was the case, she wanted to know what their new clan's name would be. Alec knew that if he went by the names during his time playing, his friends would reject them. So the attendant mentioned that there was the Clan of Golden Sword, another of Silver Pterosaur, followed by the Crimson Battle Axe and the Green Whirlwind. These were the 4 highest-ranking clans in the city. Among smaller classes, there were several that combined colors and specific traits. Alec thought of the color white as it was a special one he inherited from his grandfather. For a trait, he reflected that the other guilds might have taken family names or reference images. Looking at his 2 companions, he wondered what set them apart from the other clans. Finally, the protagonist came to a conclusion. Thus, it was decided that the name of their guild would be the White Wisdom. Wisdom would be related to knowledge itself. Possessing knowledge was the greatest advantage and probably what set them apart the most. The knowledge he had from his past life that would lead them to a good future would make them a powerful clan that would not yield to anyone. The name of this clan would forever echo in the memories of the civilians of Volks. The rising heroes who saved the cities from demon attacks draw attention. Or that was what was on the attendant's mind, already crafting the biggest fanfic in her head. That night, the protagonist had a nightmare about the attack on the village. Upon waking in the morning, the whole group was guided to the new house where they would stay. The house looked more like a mansion, but it was officially the home of the clan, the White Wisdom. Jilly and Anna could hardly believe how big the place was and how they would get lost there. Even Alex stammered nervously because he had heard that houses were more compact. However, it was precisely because he was the grandson of the great sage that such a gift was given. In other words, it was pure favoritism and nepotism. Anyway, the attendant guides the group inside, where a maid was waiting for them. The girl introduces herself as Mary, and even Alec was shocked by this, especially since Mary was Melissa's sister, the attendant, yet another step in the nepotism is clear as day. Ignoring the protagonist's complaints, Mary decides to show them the house. This makes Alec notice that these sisters share the same sense of imposition. The maid presents the living room, the dining room, and the kitchen, as well as the reception room and the servants' room. There was also a large bathroom for them to use. The second floor had their bedrooms, and there were 10 in total. Additionally, there was a storage room in the basement and much more. Alec thanks for the splendid house, but feels that this is too much for a mere silver clan. Melissa says that the administration would handle this construction, and they would only have to pay half the value for it. In comparison, other silver clans only had 3 bedrooms in their houses. Hearing this made the protagonist agree to accept the gift. The others were surprised by how he just decided to agree out of nowhere. This is because 3 bedrooms for a common house would not be enough. Alec had mentioned before that they needed to get more members, and those extra rooms were good. and Melissa adds that they always receive lists with new applicants. For now, they should enjoy the house while they can. Although inside, the attendant believes that Alec would not hesitate to sign for the house. It was worth it for her to explain everything to her boss and thus secure a bigger sponsorship. Soon the hero would think of Melissa as a capable person and would recognize her too. It wouldn't be long before the day came when the hero would keep her by his side. Alec, on the other hand, despite seeing Melissa fanficking, at least feels that she does her job well. Later, the protagonist returned to the Mage Guild and was guided to meet Watson. The day before they couldn't meet, but he heard the news from the clan administration. It was a shock for everyone because it was the first time something like this happened in Volks. Watson introduces himself again to the protagonist and mentions being kind of his great uncle. Despite this, he was not a blood relative of Guile. The two were orphans and happened to be adopted by the same person and raised together. Perhaps because at the time Alec was just a child, he never heard anything from his grandfather before, until he tells about Guile's death that happened about 7 years prior. But as imagined, Watson was not aware of his death. The guildmaster was shocked, but had stopped receiving news from his brother a long time ago. At this, the protagonist asked him to talk more about the sage before he went to live in the village. If he was curious to this point, Watson didn't mind talking about it. The two were born and raised in the same village, but an epidemic spread and killed most of the residents. Everyone was just waiting for death to arrive until the arrival of a certain someone. They were practically at death's door that day. The epidemic was the result of a curse, and those two had little mana left. In the end, they became the disciples of this visitor and learned to use magic. While Watson became the master of the Mage Guild, Guile was recognized as an adventurer. In an attempt to keep him close, the previous Lord of the Lands created the clan system. Alec was shocked that such an important thing was born from his grandfather's influence. 50 years prior, the Kars Empire, during the war, sent 3,000 soldiers there. The sage took care of 1,000 of them, annihilating half the enemy army by himself. This was the story of Volks. There isn't a soul in the city who doesn't recognize him. But then, when Guile turned 33, his partner and lover died in battle. This event was the cataclysm that led him to retire as an adventurer. And besides that, he decided to leave the city. Alec reflects on how it was a parallel, as he himself became an adventurer with Mia's death. Their circumstances were similar, but completely opposite. In this, Watson becomes curious to know if Billy was doing well too. At the time, he was a commander who retreated with his brother to go to the village. It was then that the protagonist told that the village leader was loved by all. But more than 2 weeks ago, the village was attacked by a group of unknown origin. They set fire to the houses and ended the lives of all the residents. It was a complete shot for Watson. The only survivors were that trio of young people who became adventurers. Not even the guild leader could believe this absurdity, but Alec believed that the knights who attacked were soldiers under someone's command. The two ended up reflecting if it was indeed the Empire. The protagonist reported the wise man's death to the ducal family. While the old man reflects on this, he apologizes as he gets up because he had to speak with the Lord. Watson would talk to Alec later, but the young man was happy enough to be able to chat a little. Before that, his great-uncle asked him to wait a bit. He apologizes for not having contacted him earlier, but invites him to call him whenever he needs. The protagonist thanks him the second time and finally asks for permission to leave. Watson should start looking for the people who attacked the village, and Alec would focus on the task of finding more people for his clan. Time passes, and then a young man named Rouge Howard went to visit the house of the clan, the White Wisdom. He was the third son of Viscount Howard and a level 15 swordsman. This time, Rouge went there to pursue his dream and have an important interview. As soon as he knocked on the door, Mary appeared to welcome him. She would guide him through the house, already knowing that he would be participating in the interview. The young man tries to calm himself, remembering that he had the letter of recommendation from the Swordsman's Guild. Finally, he arrived at the meeting room where he was received by Alec. Rouge bows immediately to the great-grandson of the wise man, feeling honored. The protagonist thanks him for his courtesy and introduces himself as well. In light of his reception, the swordsman notes that what should matter in this clan was not his noble status, but rather himself. The protagonist introduces Jilly, a level 50 hunter who was like his brother. Rouge was surprised by what he heard, but greeted him in the same way. There was also the other sister, Anna, who even at 7 years old was a talented mage. Although Rouge maintained his composure, inside he was just accumulating doubts about what he was hearing. Finally, there was Alec, who was a wise man in battle, but also an alchemist. He plans to use most of the materials in magical items so they can sell. Again, the poor swordsman feels he is surrounded by talented people. Besides Vac, the clan master had 2 professions that made him stain his hands with blood, and that was surprising in itself. Still, this should conclude the introductions. Instead, the protagonist suggests that Rouge talk a little about himself. But first, the young man asks to wait a bit because he wanted to know how they became so strong. Of course, the three immediately think about the destruction of the village and fall silent. Then Alec tells that he learned from his grandfather and Jilly from his father, in addition to having had team lessons with Lilienthal. That name was another that surprised Rouge. This is because Lilienthal, or Lily, was a famous and powerful figure. Moreover, Anna had trained under the tutelage of these two as well. It only took 2 weeks to reach level 15, which was impressive. Rouge was desperate at this point to join the White Wisdom. Just like his grandfather, who was part of the White Owl created by Guile, he wanted to be under the care of the wise man's successor. His dream was to revive his family from ruin, and for that, he had to become a shield knight. With all the wisdom of the protagonist, he would certainly find a suitable path. In this, Alec ends up agreeing as long as he gives up being a knight. He had heard about his grandfather, Cain Howard. Cain was a shield knight who defended his team and repelled dragon attacks. That was quite a famous story, although some people mock it as legends. Alec explains that this kind of thing was not something a knight could do. They were different calibers. This is because Rouge's grandfather was not a knight, but rather a guardian. They have aura abilities that specialize in protecting their companions. It was similar to Kadia martial arts. There were various ways to learn them once you reach level 30. It seemed that neither Rouge's father nor grandfather spoke about these details. Tain passed away when his son was still a child, and his grandson never knew much about him. The only information left behind was that he had been a great swordsman. It was hard even for Rouge to believe that his grandfather was none of that. However, the protagonist believes he could also become a guardian. He just had to change professions and knew which items were necessary for that. Despite this, Alec wanted to make sure the young man was on board with it. Guardians have much weaker attacks than knights, and it was difficult to level up without companions to protect. In general, it was a useless profession if one was alone. The idea of becoming useless makes Rouge remember people calling him the black sheep of the family. During the war, there were several opportunities to protect his companions on the front lines, but in times of peace, it was more complicated. Thus, it was necessary to reflect carefully on whether he really wanted to follow in his grandfather's footsteps. Rouge had always looked forward to achieving great accomplishments, and it wasn't just him. His father and brother had always tried to pursue Cain's path. After reflecting for a moment, the young man stands up and kneels. Finally, he responds that he would dedicate his shield to Alec and asks him to share his knowledge. In this case, the protagonist agrees and commits to making him a guardian, and he would prepare a prosperous stage for the young man to shine. Rouge deeply thanks him for the help and promises to become quite useful. Later, Alec checks that there was still one more person to evaluate the next day. If the person in question for the next day was suitable, they would finish the interviews. Jilly, on the other hand, was worried about the protagonist. After all, he had been working too hard doing all the work alone. Alec laughs and responds that he is fine. They didn't have to worry about his well-being now. The next day, at the Martial Arts Guild, a certain boy was recommended to a silver clan. He could hardly believe that the guildmaster did this, knowing he was useless in a group. Ignoring his complaints, the master hands over the documents for him to go for the interview. Then, Hastel hurried to meet Alec because the interview was on the same day he received the news. The protagonist checked the details of his application. Hastel had a taijutsu level 5 and seemed to have given up on evasions, focusing on offensive skills. Hearing this kind of thing makes the martial artist sigh. Martial artists have various evasive skills. It was a common style to see. But unlike usual, Hastel completely focused on the offensive part. People said that guys like him were useless, and he understood their thoughts well. However, to his surprise, the protagonist saw this difference in a positive light. After all, Hastel plans to focus everything on offense so he can unleash a true Hadouken. However, even Hastel didn't know that such a skill existed, getting all excited. This was a special move that could be perfected under certain conditions. Despite this, Alec was somewhat surprised that this hadn't been the boy's goal from the beginning. The boy says that it actually was, but whenever he asked other people, they always told him that such a powerful skill didn't exist. From all indications, it wasn't a commonly known technique. When Rouge was younger, his village was attacked by a stone golem. A lone adventurer took care of it using only his fists. His family was poor and couldn't buy a weapon, so the boy decided to fight using only his body. Rouge's dream was to become strong enough to take down a stone golem with his bare hands. But life was not easy. No group wanted him due to his lack of evasive skills. He didn't even have chances to level up and had to endure hardships only with medicinal herbs. It was a complicated journey. Alec agrees that martial artists of this type could be quite useless, which hurt the poor man's heart. But he still believes that Hastel would be fine. The protagonist was wise and could heal him whenever necessary, which means they could work together within the White Wisdom. although his training would be quite tough, so preparation was needed. But Hastile was so happy to be accepted that he agreed to take anything. Finally, they reached the end of the interviews, and several days passed since then. They had 2 new members on the team who needed to get stronger. But before that, Alec wanted them to get to know each other better. Rouge introduces himself first, and Hastile gets tense because he is level 15. There was also Lorraine, whose thief profession was at level 14. The 2 look at the remaining recruit, who remained quiet, clearly nervous. Finally, the boy introduces himself as a martial artist and claims to be level 12. Now, Alec had the opportunity to take them to his training location, the underwater cave. Before they entered the place, the leader would explain how everything works. Lorraine would be responsible for finding enemies and attacking them as soon as possible. Next, she could relay all the monsters to Rouge. The basics would be to block and dodge with her shield, drawing their attention. Finally, Anna should take them down with her thunder magic. Hastile is worried because no task was assigned to him, but Alec explains that the martial artist should hit them with stones and focus on his spirit. This type of responsibility seemed too simple, and he wouldn't even participate in the battles. The protagonist asked him to be quiet and explains that it was all part of the training. He shouldn't worry too much and just trust him for now. Finally, everyone is guided into the cave, with Lorraine going ahead. Hastile begins to understand how this training would be quite difficult. As previously presented, the thief was responsible for drawing the monster's attention. Next, Rouge stepped in front and defended against the attack that came his way. Finally, Anna unleashed her magic and finished it off. Alec praises the group for being able to put the basics into practice, but he also warns the Guardian to make shield strikes. It would be more complicated to hit them if they were sent back. Additionally, Hastile should be careful to throw a stone next time. The boy apologizes, and the protagonist says they should continue their path through the cave. The group repeats the previous process, with Hastile having serious difficulties throwing his stones. Alec comments on Anna having leveled up. After all, her spells were stronger. The others praise her for her efforts, but the martial artist remains reflective. After all, the girl was the leader's sister and would obviously receive favoritism. Not that it was his business, although Hastile's discomfort was quite clear, until Alec mentions that the boy also leveled up. The size of his kai was greater than before. Even the boy hadn't noticed this detail. It seems his senses were sharper. Perhaps it was due to the team's experience and his spirit practice. In any case, the leader praises him for doing very well. He would eventually be able to polish a killer move. At this rate, he would be the first in the team to achieve his dream. Hastile ends up agreeing, as he could soon become as strong as the others. For now, they would continue deeper into the cave. And now that he visualized his evolution, the martial artist is determined to keep going. He was ready to throw as many stones as necessary and believe in his leader. On the other hand, Lorraine reflects on the conversation about achieving a dream. It was impossible to fill an empty stomach with such things. Meanwhile, in the royal capital Bran, Chris made his way through the corridors to find the princess. He entered the room where she was and noticed the girl was praying. The princess had just finished and decided to focus on the report she was about to receive. Chris tells her about the wise man's village that was completely swept away. It was still uncertain who was behind this, but it must have been the Empire's doing. He asks the girl what they should do, and she reflects on it. For now, the princess suggests they slow down their actions or her brother would notice. In her mind, the girl laughed as everything went as she expected. Now the illusion that the wise man protected them had vanished forever. Moreover, it was time for a fun war to begin. Meanwhile, Lorraine was all happy about the big monsters they defeated, curious to know how much money the materials would bring. Hastile reminds her that all of this was in the hands of the clan and not hers. The leader intended to sell them as items, although he himself felt a bit sad for not making money off the creatures they took down. Rouge understands how they feel, but if Alec hadn't been there, they wouldn't have been able to hunt so many monsters. At this point, the martial artist was admiring his new leader a lot. Additionally, he complains about how the thief doesn't even try to clean the monsters. Anna ends up getting curious about why Lorraine became a thief. She heard from Alec that cleaning monsters was the job of thieves and hunters, as they were skilled with their hands. It ends up becoming the most awkward silence since Lorraine was the only one doing nothing, until she decides to change the subject to how it was the first time the mage spoke to her. The thief gets all excited, asking if Anna was perhaps interested in her. And then Alec takes the opportunity to hand a certain paper to the girl. It was a list of monster parts and prices in the market. As Anna herself mentioned, he would leave the part of cleaning the bodies to the hunters and thieves. If she wished, she could take on the task of delivering the final blow to the creatures instead. In any case, Lorraine needed to carefully review the list, as the clan's meals depended on her now. The protagonist thanks the others for helping and being so patient. When the third day inside the cave arrived, the whole group was exhausted. Even with all the hearing used by the leader, they were in this state. Going beyond a schedule restricted to 3 consecutive days was too difficult. On the other hand, Alec and Anna were perfectly fine, which only scared the newcomers. There were still 2 more days of exploration inside. Precisely because Anna was fine, Hastel and Rouge did not allow themselves to falter out of pride. Alec praises Lorraine for her effort in clearing the monsters and gathering materials. He asked her not to look so sad, just 2 more days, and everyone could rest. As soon as she heard she would receive a salary of 20,000, the thief perked up again. 4 days later, everyone was back home and the protagonist was motivated. After all, it was time to prepare the items despite having gathered many materials. Lorraine worked hard, and with that, Alec would have no problems managing the clan's expenses. Before he could start working, however, Mary came to alert him about a visitor. It was an older woman claiming to be from the orphanage. As soon as the protagonist went to see her, the woman greeted him politely. Just when Lorraine returned to the clan's house, she found Director Lana on the couch. The director of the orphanage revealed that Dial hid the fact that he was adopted so the group wouldn't get caught in schemes. Moreover, Lorraine joining the clan of the wise man's grandson was wonderful. Alec says that in a way, he and the thief were almost like relatives, since he was also an orphan raised by his grandfather. Guile was quite restrictive in his teachings, but that was why he got so far in life. Now he had his friend and little sister there, even if they weren't related. Deep down, the protagonist's wish was to create a place where they could feel safe. Lorraine thought Alec must be an innocent and spoiled guy for being the wise man's grandson and living in such a luxurious place. But even little Anna, being so young, became stronger and worked hard. Lana was sure those two felt safe around Alec, but there was something that bothered her. Over the past few years, someone had been sending donations to the orphanage. It started right after Lorraine left the orphanage, and the woman thought it was from the girl, although she never had the courage to ask directly. To tell the truth, another donation arrived the day before, and this worried the director because the thief must be doing dangerous things. Lorraine remembered her life, which was always filled with tense situations. Although she learned to steal, she used her skills to take things from bad people. But above all, the director wanted Lorraine to be able to live her own life. Still, the girl always worried about the other children in the orphanage. The protagonist mentioned they were working to gather materials and investigate dungeons. As long as they were together, Lana wouldn't have to worry about the girl. This made the director sigh with relief, as she could count on the wise man's successor in this case. Lorraine sat down to think, and was startled when Alec came up and found her. He didn't even notice the girl had returned and told her about the director's visit. At that moment, the thief pretended not to have heard anything from the conversation and how she wanted to keep Lana worry-free. With that, she took the opportunity to leave quickly. At night, the girl was in her room when she received a visit from the leader. He was thinking about something after hearing what the orphanage director said earlier. In fact, Alec wanted his clan to make donations too. Lorraine was caught off guard as she saw no reason for him to do something like that. The protagonist explained that his grandfather taught him to use his power to help people. However, he was never able to save anyone. At least Alec wanted to be able to take care of those around him and support them. This included Lorraine herself, since she was part of his clan and was like family to him. His words made the girl remember how she was also considered a sister. After laughing, she mentioned that she could even call him brother from then on. At the same time, Anna would surely get annoyed, which made her change her mind. Instead, Lorraine would call him boss and ignored Alec's opinion about it. As soon as the protagonist left the room, he reflected on when he interviewed the girl, because even before, the thief was clearly very interested in making money. She accepted to work in the clan without hearing the other conditions. At the beginning, the protagonist didn't even know his past, but considering the circumstances, Lorraine believed that his clan was of greater benefit. In any case, now he had all the necessary professions gathered. As the clan grew and became more stable, it could become bigger and better to live in. Alec wanted to level everyone up before Jilly finished his work and returned home. That's why the group headed this time to the Goblin Island. When checked, everyone seemed perfectly motivated to work. In this case, Alec decides to start describing their tasks on the island. He points on the map where they were and noted a port on the other side, as well as a fishing village. They could start aiming for the mine that was in the center of the island. This nearby village was where the miners lived, and they requested the extermination of the goblins. The main objective was the Goblin King, but defeating 20 of them would be good too. Anna asks if all these monsters were normal. The protagonist explains that most of them were normal, but they received reports of archers, shamans, and leaders as well. The difficulty of battling would increase as they approached the center. It was possible that the goblin nest was on the other side of the island near the mines. The strategy would basically be the same as the submerged cave, except that Lorraine would participate in killing goblins too. She was surprised as she felt unprepared for such a big task. Anna even came to give advice that there was no need to overthink, just kill them with tricks. With the plan set, they head to the village near the mines. On the way, they dealt with 10 goblins and it didn't seem very difficult. Anna thought Lorraine was amazing for managing to kill a monster with a single attack, although the girl herself felt conflicted. It didn't take long for them to see the village in the distance. Alec decided he would go ahead, which worried Rouge as it could be dangerous. But the protagonist assured that everything would be fine. The others could wait by taking a break. As soon as he left, Hastel commented on how incredible the leader was for being so confident and well-prepared. Rouge agreed it might be an inheritance of the wise man's knowledge or a divine guidance from Sluran. Since Anna was curious about it, the Guardian began to tell about Sluran. The kingdom's faith wasn't very well spread, so people who weren't nobles didn't know it. Sluran was the god of light and perhaps one of the most powerful. It was said that Sluran governs life and light, creating all the gods, dragons, and powers. Even Lorraine was impressed to hear these details. That's when Alec returned, saying he rented a small room for them to sleep in. During the night, the protagonist went to switch the watch with Hastel. The martial artist was surprised because it was still somewhat early, although the mage couldn't sleep well. It wasn't exactly because he was nervous, but because he had high expectations. He shared that he had always dreamed of becoming an adventurer since he was young. Changing the subject, Alec asked about the practice of shikuchi, and the boy replied that he had been doing as ordered. The protagonist was happy to hear that, as using shikuchi would work to defeat the Goblin King. Still, there would only be one opportunity to do so. This anime was completely different from those they had faced so far. Focus was necessary. The next day, the group continued heading to the other side of the island. The girls worked together and supported each other during the attack on the goblins. Seeing them putting in effort made Alec praise them, especially the thief who was starting to get used to the task. Still, the monsters were getting stronger and stronger as they advanced. While reflecting on this, they suddenly noticed that several goblins had gathered. Among them, there was a leader who would be potentially dangerous. The group combat began, and each of them was responsible for taking care of one monster. When Rouge's shield was turned, Anna came to help him with her magic. Lorraine killed another while hiding, and finally, they finished the battle. Alec commented that they had now fulfilled the quota of 20 goblins. Their coordination as a group was great. Hastel soon pointed out that there was a path from where those monsters came. When they followed the road, they found the nest where the creatures lived. They weren't just normal, there were several archers and chiefs gathered, although it wasn't a surprise. Alec agreed to hunt them, which made Hastel shout in shock. Even Rouge was shocked because it was too large a number for them to handle. As soon as the protagonist calmed them down because he would participate in the fight this time, Lorraine warned that they had been noticed by the goblins. Taking advantage of the moment, the leader stood up and used a spell that made all the creatures fly away. With that, the real hunt was about to begin. The protagonist ordered Rouge to draw the leader's attention, and Anna would reduce their numbers. While the leader uses protection and barrier magic, he also guides Lorraine to approach from behind the creatures and take care of the weaker ones. On the other hand, Hastel should protect Anna until Alec creates the necessary opening. It was an important task, and so the mage would truly rely on the martial artist. The battle continues, and there comes a point where the Guardian can no longer withstand so many simultaneous attacks. Finally, he pushes the creatures away, and the mage seizes the opportunity to unleash a fire attack. As expected, Anna's attacks were astonishing, but a fire arrow needed to be defended by her shield. That should have been the attack of a shaman who survived, and Lorraine was the one who took care of him immediately. Despite this, there were still many more gathering. Rouge feels that he is still managing to hold the front line. He would surpass this moment so he could become even stronger. With that, the Guardian provokes the monsters to attack him. And to his surprise, the charge from that leader was much stronger than the others. It didn't take long for the support to arrive, healing Rouge's wounds and allowing him to push the goblin away. Alec was a lifesaver, making him feel capable of going far. The battle continues for even longer with each one doing their job. They were almost taking care of everyone when Hastel alerted the group to the arrival of the Goblin King. Despite the creature before him being huge and terrifying, Rouge would have to endure it for another 2 minutes. In that, the protagonist instructed the martial artist to start preparing. Lorraine tried to approach from behind, but the Goblin King noticed her right away. She narrowly avoided his attack, which made her wonder if they could really hold out for so long. Alec tells Anna to put up a wall of fire in the center, and she casts her magic. Meanwhile, Hastel had to stay focused and use his spirit. He couldn't lose the timing and had to concentrate completely on his task. To help him, Alec uses an enchantment to make his fists stronger. Although he prepares, he wonders if he could really do this after so much practice. But considering that his leader was trusting everything in this moment, he couldn't disappoint him. Finally, Hastel dashed toward the Goblin King to use his Shikuchi. His fists unleashed Hadouken punches directly at the monster. The other adventurers froze in surprise as the outcome of the battle was decided in a single blow. Thus, the victory belonged to Hastel, and Lorraine came running to praise him. Despite this, all the young man could do was start laughing quite loudly. Alec approached to congratulate him. At this point, he earned his MVP title of the day. It was then that Hastel mentioned that his friends call him Hattie, and he wanted them to call him that too. The protagonist agreed and exchanged a fist bump with him, until Lorraine complained because she also wanted to become friends with her leader. She even managed to get a treasure that was the Goblin King's crown. The girl took the opportunity to steal it right after Hastel attacked him. It was a highly valuable item that could be sold for 20,000. Noticing he was being left out, Rouge ran off to also be treated more casually by Alec, and out of nowhere, he declared himself a rival to Hastel. Anna commented that she kind of felt bad for the goblins. This was because the monsters also had their own homes. The protagonist asked her not to worry too much, as the monsters were rapidly increasing their numbers. Finally, the group returned to the clan's house after a long journey. Mary welcomed them and was about to tell what happened while they were away, but before that, someone appeared. That person was Jilly, who finally returned after managing to change his profession to sniper. He had gotten new clothes after returning from the royal capital. The young man traveled with a caravan until they were attacked by third-rate bandits. In the end, Jilly took care of them all by himself, and on the way back he used the same caravan until they were attacked by wyverns. There were 2 of those monsters, although they hadn't been very difficult. This intrigued Alec as he knew they shouldn't be near the royal capital. Again, Jilly was able to defeat them and get his revenge against the wyverns. Mary apologized for interrupting the conversation, but there was a visitor waiting for the clan master. As they went to the meeting room, they found none other than Kane and Hans. Hans was crying as soon as he saw the protagonist, relieved that he was safe. In that, Alec took the opportunity to introduce those 2 men to the rest of the clan. Hans was a merchant from the village they used to live in, responsible for selling his grandfather's potions in the city. Kane was a bard who used to visit them once a year as a traveler. The bard tells that he found the merchant in the capital. It had been a long time since he went to the village. But then, when the 2 arrived at the location, they found it destroyed. Hans was looking for new places to sell and had no idea what had happened. The village was in a horrible state, but they did not find Alec's body. That's why both made a journey from the royal capital to find him there. Kane approaches to hug Alec, saying that he has done very well so far. Completely breaking the mood, the bard needed to leave now, having only stopped by to greet him. Thus, he takes his leave, bidding farewell to the others, and mentions that he was going to the Kars Empire. There were things he had to learn precisely because he had no origins and would return to report if he discovered anything important. But before leaving, Kane stopped to talk to the protagonist again. He warns him about the black dog but does not go into details. Instead, he leaves and mentions that maybe Abby could be by his side on the next visit. Jilly mentions that this guy always moves like the wind, never staying in the same place. Alec thought that Kane could be a reincarnated like him based on how much this man knew. But even when he let some questions from his old world slip by, there was no sign that the bard understood anything. Maybe Kane was just a guy with great knowledge. He would have been good company and a reliable friend to have around. The protagonist is worried about his trip to the Kars Empire, and Gilly mentions that knowing Kami, everything would be fine. Hans agreed because the traveler was the kind of guy who knew when to flee. Despite everything, Alec had a bad feeling. That's when Anna asked where Hans intended to go this time. But the merchant himself was lost now that he was homeless. In that case, the protagonist suggested that the man join his clan. Even though Hans was a merchant, he would be quite useful for selling the group's items and potions. Above all, Alec needed Hans's skills, and he was a trustworthy person. These words, full of praise, immediately convinced him to join the clan. With that, Mary took the opportunity to prepare the room on the 2nd floor. Currently, they were managing the clan with her and Melissa's help, so having Hans on the team would be great. In the Chronicles of Degard, having merchants and artisans in your clan was a blessing. In this world, on the other hand, it was different. Perhaps because people tend to copy Giles' clan, artisans seem to have disappeared from the map. Alec wonders why few people become guardians and do not know about the explosive Hadouken. Maybe they were trying to weaken the adventurers. Meanwhile, Watson was receiving a report on the searches made. As far as they knew from the sage, it was concluded that the ducal family did not know of his passing for 7 years. To make matters worse, no official report arrived regarding the village attack. It was strange that they were trying to hide information at all costs. The duchy must have received the records, but they must not have understood the weight of Giles' loss. About 7 years prior, the person responsible for delivering the reports was replaced by someone unrelated. They ended up losing those reports to the hands of an unknown person. Watson considers that it could be the Empire's doing, but that would mean they knew about the sage's loss 7 years prior and would have attacked the village at that time. It was then that the guildmaster realized that everything could be the work of the royal capital itself. Guile was not only an excellent adventurer, but also the guardian of the kingdom, so news of his death would bring problems. This would only provide more reasons to discuss matters with the area lord regarding this loss. He wanted to say that the one responsible for this mess has some hidden motive. There must be another force moving the pieces that they have yet to discover. In any case, they should start preparing against the Empire's actions. Felicia Black was the leader of the Special Forces of Cerberus, also known as the Black Dog. At the very least, they can be sure that it was Felicia who ordered the attack on the village. She was a mystery who opted for surprise and bizarre attacks. If the Black Dog knew about the sage's death, then they were in serious trouble. Meanwhile, Felicia herself heard about the Tenryu festival and was pleased as it would be of great value. In parallel, Alec's clan managed to finish the task of dealing with the goblins. Hastel gained confidence since that day and motivated his companions. The group continued working to become stronger, facing other bosses, and thus, they all reached level 30 thanks to their efforts. As expected, it was right to place them all on the same power level, so everyone would be able to collaborate without feeling left behind. Hans appeared in the protagonist's office to check if there were potions for sale. He was anxious because the number of orders was enormous due to their popularity. Even so, they were trying to avoid large-scale orders. During the discussion, there were sudden knocks on the door. A knight suddenly appeared, asking for permission to enter, and just barging in. She was Henrietta Pendragon, the daughter of the Lord of the City and leader of the Silver Wyvern. Beside her was her brother, who apologized for Henrietta being so impulsive. In the end, they were invited to sit down and talk. The brother introduced his sister as a holy knight. It was rare to see noble ladies on the front lines like her. Her brother was Polk Pendragon, a year younger than the girl. He served as a sub-leader, and his role was as a mage. In addition to these two, there was their butler Seth, a high-level monk. Getting to the main point, the young man wanted to discuss the Celestial Dragon Festival happening next month. Alec knew about this event. It celebrated the sealing of the Demon Duke who attacked Volks. Still, Polk mentioned that festival days often saw crimes occurring frequently. They arranged for security and wanted the cooperation of the White Wisdom clan as well. The protagonist agreed after all, they were affiliated with the city. At this, the two men shook hands with polite smiles. It didn't take long for Alec to notice that despite the siblings seeming like adventurers, they came more as landlords. Henrietta claimed that her attitude was indeed good and boasted a little. It was then that Seth mentioned it was indeed a relief. He reminded his lady that there was another purpose for being there besides this. This left Alec curious to know what it was. Finally, the butler bowed to ask for an autograph from the mage, and even added that he should write it for Henrietta on it. It seemed that the girl truly admired the successor of the great sage Guile. Henrietta became all embarrassed by the way Seth decided to get straight to the point, and despite the situation, the protagonist saw no problem in signing for her. As soon as they'd finished the negotiations, the two siblings left in good spirits. They were a somewhat strange and dynamic duo. That other princess was also from the royal family, although the atmosphere around her was different. Judging by the way the siblings acted, it just seemed that Henrietta was quite curious. It was then that the protagonist remembered he had work to do and hurried back. The next day, Hastel came to deliver the tools the protagonist requested. He was curious to see that his leader was working with alchemy to make the potions. Alec explained that he decided to take on this other profession because he wanted to make money beyond selling materials. Alchemy, as one leveled up, could also be useful during battles. This conversation gave the protagonist the idea that they could discuss advanced classes with the rest of the group. With that, he gathered everyone at the table to discuss it. Lorraine mentioned that she never expected to level up so much, with Hastel sharing the same opinion. Rouge retorted that as a guardian, he was determined to become a tank, but even Anna hadn't stopped to think about her future. Then, Alec surprised the group by saying he intended to achieve the necromancer class. Instead of becoming a sage, he always planned to acquire this other class. It would only be necessary to increase his dark magic to become a necromancer. In contrast, to become a sage, he would have to increase the level of white magic. Since the protagonist wanted to perfect healing and resurrection at the same time, he would have to practice both. Increasing alchemy would also allow him to unlock the creation of things for necromancers. The rest of the group was impressed by how determined Alec was. A mage who increased his dark magic comes close to this definition, while a sorcerer focuses on offensive magic. This made Anna think of Polk, as he himself was a sorcerer. She always found the dead to be scary. The girl wanted to become stronger and protect her brother, so it would be better to focus on offense. Originally, Rouge intended to become a knight, but decided to change to be a guardian. Lorraine, on the other hand, received Alec's suggestion to become a treasure thief or an assassin. The idea of acquiring treasures seemed quite fun for the girl, and if she were a level 50 hunter with a level 30 thief, she could do that. While Jilly, who was a hunter and the vice leader of the clan, would probably become the thief's teacher eventually. Despite this, she grumbled that that type was quiet and hard to talk to anyway. Alec commented that it was also possible to learn the assassin class, focusing on stealth and intelligence, specialized in offense. As Lorraine reflected on her next decision, Hastel asked about himself, to which the protagonist says that the only option was to become a fist saint at level 50. If he increased his white mage class, he could even become a monk, but that wasn't quite what he wanted. In that case, he could only become a fist saint and perfect his skills. From afar, they had a quite balanced team now, although Alec felt he had pushed some of these people into their respective positions. For now, the plan for the next day was to defeat the boss of the underground tomb dungeon. With considerable effort, the clan managed to secure their victory against the dungeon game, and it didn't take long for Alec to become anxious upon seeing the treasures left behind. This time, the idea wasn't to focus on levels, but rather to obtain important items. Soon the protagonist found what he was looking for. It was the Scaff of Perdition. When a necromancer has it, they can double the number of skeletons they summon. The others just looked at the staff with clear dread at how ugly it was. Jilly was the one who asked his friend to return quickly instead of staying there. On the way, Alec felt he was being followed, but let the feeling pass. The next day, Hans came to talk to the protagonist with a disheartened face. This was because potion sales could end up being banned in the future. His products were too popular. Somewhat confused, Alec decided to check the details that were put in the documents. The prices outside his shop were a bit too high, all because the merchants were taking advantage of the potion's popularity. This kind of thing would eventually become bad for the people of Volks. Henrietta was the one who said this as she suddenly appeared in his office. She wondered if her father knew about the market prices, and Seth believed he did. The girl laughed when Alec showed shock at her sudden presence. It even made him ask if she had too much free time, irritating her. In any case, he asked if his potions would be banned for being too cheap. Hans agreed, although even the stocks had been sold and 2,000 more were demanded. It was an astounding amount, and Alec was sure he couldn't make them. But at that moment, a notification from the Alchemy Guild arrived. From then on, if they were to sell, only those 2,000 units would be allowed. It seemed that the merchants and the alchemists didn't want their potions sold at the regular price. If he had to produce them in bulk, the protagonist would lose too much time hunting and helping his clan. If possible, he would like to negotiate to keep the quantity small. In that, Henrietta suggested that they should just produce more. When the mage tried to explain that he couldn't make that much, the girl mentioned that he just had to hire employees. Hans explained that you can't hire people without the permission of the Alchemy Guild. Then, the princess fell silent before saying it would be fine if Alec trained those people. After all, it was clear that he was good when teaching novice people. It made sense. The protagonist wouldn't have to visit the guild if he wanted to give lessons. He could just teach people from scratch, like Anna and Hastel. This made him remember the book left by his grandfather, who wanted to be useful to the world. In that case, Alec agreed to give it a try. Hans and Henrietta laughed happily because everything was resolved successfully. Seeing this, the protagonist felt that despite this girl being a bit scatterbrained, in the end, she was quite reliable. A few days passed, and Alec went out to shop for the clan. On the way, he bumped into someone and knocked over some of his purchases. He apologized, and the person who bumped into him quickly recognized him. The guy wanted to know if the mage in front of him was the leader of White Wisdom. He never imagined he would meet him like this and helped Alec up. The guy introduced himself as the leader of the Golden Sword clan, and his name was Ryuto. The Golden Sword was the only mithril rank clan in Volks. Beside him was Maria, the vice leader, who also greeted the protagonist. Ryuto had heard some details from Henrietta, and it seemed that the girl was a big fan of the successor of the Wise. Alec remembered that Ryuto must be a magical swordsman, and Maria a priestess who uses resurrection magic. In the middle of the conversation, the leader of the other clan commented on the festival that was going to happen soon, and for the advanced clans there would be a banquet prepared for a social gathering. He would love for White Wisdom to participate as well, which shocked Alec since they were only silver class. Even so, the leader knew that eventually White Wisdom would grow too. Beyond that, Ryuto mentioned seriously that there was another thing he wanted to discuss. Instead of talking now, the guy said he would send an invitation later and said goodbye. Alec is left confused and then returns home as usual. A few days later, Mary came to bring the invitation they received from the Golden Sword. Thus, the entire clan prepared for the social banquet and went to the venue. The group headed to the noble district, to the house of the Golden Sword. As soon as the carriage stopped, Alec made a move to get up, but Mary quickly stopped him because a guard would arrive to take them. It was part of the etiquette. First, the leader would get down, then Anna, and finally the maid would exit last. Not that adventurers care about etiquette, but being in the noble district, they had to follow the rules. The protagonist saw that another carriage had arrived. It was the one Jilly was in. At the entrance, there was a figure waiting, and Alec wondered if it was Maria. But who appeared all cheerful was Henrietta after waiting for his arrival. She was invited every year and knew the details of the event very well. Because of this, the princess guided them into the clan's house with clear pride. Ryuto appeared a little later to welcome them. He mentioned that they would have a brief presentation and could enjoy their time freely. The entire clan enjoyed the party with their meals and music. In the midst of this, Henrietta noticed that Alex seemed a bit distracted, and he said he was looking for something that wasn't alcohol. In that case, she suggested that she could ask the servants to change his drink. If he didn't know what to eat, there was the order of appetizers, soup, and finally, the main dish. The protagonist mentioned that he knew she was a big fan of his and all that, but he wanted to know if she showed such kindness to any new clan. And Henrietta agreed, as protecting the people of Volks was the job of the veteran clans. Moreover, the Red Battle Axe and the Green Whirlwind were veterans and had to help the new generation. These words made the protagonist say that she was indeed quite kind. Henrietta stammered that it wasn't quite that, and Ryuto interrupted the conversation to call them to talk. The three stepped outside the party for more privacy. Ryuto shared that he received information from the divine revelation that descended upon the kingdom of holy light. Next month, a great calamity would arrive in Volks. The divine revelations of this country were prophecies from the god Sirlin, and because of this, the young man asked Alec to avoid going on hunts too far from the city. Additionally, the next day, Polk mentioned that the Tenryu festival was not something common. Perhaps it was because the ritual of magical offerings had not yet been performed. According to ancient documents, the sealing of the celestial dragon would not last forever. As soon as the power that maintains it runs out, the seal would break within a few centuries. The original purpose of the festival was to give this power to maintain the seal. The calamity mentioned in the divine revelation must be related to the resurrection of the demon duke. Henrietta couldn't believe it, for if that happened, Volks would be destroyed. The demon was not a monster, but a demon god that even the celestial dragon could not completely defeat. With the current military strength of Volks, there was no way they could survive. In this, Alec fell silent to reflect and mentioned that even without defeating him, there was still hope. They could work to seal the demon duke on their own. The princess wondered if that was even possible, but the protagonist said that if they combined their strengths, who knows what could happen. This was the return of Despair, an event placed on the 3rd anniversary of the original game. It was a grand finale set for high-ranked players, an opponent that had to be faced with their best equipment. If the knowledge was correct, Alec believed they could save the city. The golden sword was an item that possessed the power of the celestial dragon necessary for the seal. Ryuto decided to take on this task, and Henrietta would take care of the other weapons and armor with the holy attribute of the silver wyvern. The White Wisdom would research ways to weaken the target and prepare the ritual. To prevent panic, they would avoid saying this publicly and could guide the people further away. The remaining time was about a month, but time was short. Ryuto and Henrietta were determined to do their best to help. Then, the princess withdrew to share this information with her clan. At that moment, the other leader said he always knew it was a good idea to count on Alec. Even if it was called knowledge, they presumed it was information from the old sage. If they could take down the demon duke, Alec would become an even greater hero than Guile. Although the protagonist felt nervous about the idea, Ryuto let the words hanging. Then he withdrew because he wanted to enjoy his time while it was possible. It was at that moment that Alec understood what was happening. It was possible that as soon as the Celestial Festival ended, Ryuto would ask Maria to marry him. At that same hour, the protagonist begs him to be careful at the festival, which startles the boy, who agrees nonetheless. Henrietta calls the two again because it was time for the meeting at the party. Since then, everyone has been quite busy. The preparations to find the Demon Duke made them strive day after day, whether it was leveling up, preparing new spells, training in alchemy, and much more. On another day, Alec and Jilly went to check the sealed sanctuary. The seal was starting to fade, so they needed to raise a barrier. Placing spells in the 4 directions of the sanctuary would activate it correctly and weaken the demon during its awakening. Originally, it was a trick used against enemies at different events. If something like that exists in this world, it could be adapted, and that's why Alec researched as much as he could. Fortunately, the sanctuary was outside the city. and the protagonist would place the spells around Volks. In that, Jilly mentions they should go ahead and start from the south. It all began with someone saying they should lighten the mood before the battle, and they ended up having a meal together. That month was really tough, but Alec was happy that everyone was there with him. The next day would mark the beginning of the Celestial Dragon Festival. They worked to check the sealed sanctuary and had no doubts about the demon's resurrection. All the preparations were made, and all that was left was to wait. It would be a tough battle, but Alec wanted everyone to recharge for the big day. So they all toasted and had a big warm meal. Alec thanked his friend for helping to guide everyone in the clan when he was busy, and Jilly felt proud to support him. Although Lorraine thought the vice leader was quite brutal in his teachings. Rouge agreed, but that strictness also helped everyone improve, making him confident. Hastel agreed that everyone had gotten stronger, but the one who worked the hardest was Anna. She not only raised her black magic to level 43, but her white magic reached 25. The protagonist was surprised to hear this, to which the martial artist noted it wasn't a direct order from the leader himself, and Alec explained he had given mana potions for emergencies, not for daily use. In that, Anna got nervous trying to explain herself, until Hans interrupted and defended her, claiming to be responsible for the extra potions. The girl asked him to sell her some mana potions. Alec was confused about why the mage had asked him instead of the leader, and Lorraine interrupted too, claiming to be the first to give that idea. Anna seemed nervous, and when asked what was wrong, the girl showed determination to become stronger. Even Hastel said that if there were more mana potions, he could level up efficiently. The boy got nervous for being thrown into the middle of the mess and tried to explain himself. To which the thief added that since they kept it a secret from the boss, she should at least talk about it with Hans. That's how Anna offered all the money she had and bought a few potions. Despite the mess, the protagonist understood the situation, even wanting to know why she went so far without consulting him. Anna finally said it was because she wanted to increase her white magic. This determination confused Alec, as she had previously said she wanted to become a sorceress, until the girl stated she would like to become a sage. She heard from Jilly that Alec reached level 35 as a sage to use resurrection magic. Anna thought the protagonist was always right, for it was thanks to him that everyone could strengthen themselves and gain confidence. But it made her wonder why she wanted to become strong. She reflected on it alone. It was never about taking by force to prevent having things taken away, but to protect them. That's when the girl realized that becoming a sorceress wouldn't help Alec. The protagonist retorted that it wasn't true, but Anna interrupted him because he never thought about the idea of dying. If that happened, no one could bring him back. Even if they could protect themselves, no one would be able to protect Alec. At the time of battle, Maria was present, but even Anna wanted to protect her brother so he wouldn't lose anyone else. Faced with this determination, Alec decided to accept her words. It was true that he had been rushing lately to stabilize the clan, but at this point, Anna was no longer someone who needed to be protected. The protagonist wasn't angry about her decision to have worked hard in secret. Quite the opposite, Alec intended to protect everyone as much as he could, and he would entrust the same task to his little sister and Jilly as well. It seemed that the clan had become quite united if they reached the point of helping each other so much, but at least Alec wanted to know the next time they would do this, despite the fact that poor Rouge was the only one left out of all the gossip. Meanwhile, during the night, the sanctuary in the middle of the forest began to crack. It was the awakening of the Demon Duke happening in real time. About an hour before the great battle was to take place, the clan received an urgent report. It was one of the knights from the Silver Wyvern who came to alert them. The members on patrol said that the barrier to the west had been destroyed. There were only 4 hours left until the awakening of the Demon Duke. They needed to hurry and set it up again. As soon as they arrived at the location, the spell was broken. This was a shock because only high-ranking clans should know their locations. The plan was to lower the demon's level from 100 to 80 with barriers at every corner. If one of them was missing, the barrier would not activate. Merely an opponent of level 80 would be something they could face on equal terms. Alec knew he could fix the damage, but the entire magic was undone as well. They would have to hurry to repair it before the demon's awakening. Before that, Jilly positioned himself in front of his friend, alerting whoever was hiding that they had been seen. A group of people emerged from the middle of the forest, commenting that there were at least a few there worthy of their attention. The leader of the group said that the hunter was nothing compared to the coward of their leader. Then Alec warned everyone that this was a very strong conjurer. The mage praised him for at least being able to notice something so simple. But what caught Alec's attention was that all the members of the group had black hair and eyes like his. This observation made the woman furious, and they jumped into combat. The protagonist guided his companions so they could take care of the group. Thanks to this, they prevented the joint attack, and the leader shouted at them, calling them fools. She questioned whether they even thought they could win with low-rank professions. Alec agreed, retorting that a demon sorceress like her was in the worst position. Frustrated, the woman asked where he had gained knowledge about her equipment and barrier when it didn't exist in this country. That was when Alec asked if she was perhaps a reincarnated being. Everyone fell silent at these words, but the leader was left confused. In any case, she intended to leave half of them dead and make the leader talk. The protagonist prepared his magic as the sorceress created a blood demon. She also used assimilation, and the warrior with an axe attacked Rouge's shield. The boy was startled by the brutality of the move and his silence. On the other hand, the mage cast a spell only to be stopped by Lorraine and Hastel. The two could work as a team, with Hastel having learned the Shadon skill, offering Kai-based ballistic shots against his opponent. Anna took the opportunity to create protection for her two colleagues in battle. At the same time, she worried about Alec and Jilly. The demon sorceress used assimilation, a skill that shares esteem and mental strength with her demon. They also shared damage, although a demon should have regenerative abilities. As the demon charged at them, the protagonist asked his friend to hold it. In the meantime, the sorceress attacked Alec, who became her new target. She was well aware that the boy knew everything about magic, but his muscular strength did not equate to such knowledge. Alec recognized her strength as well. That must have been the reason she opted for assimilation. Taking the opportunity, he could also show his secret move. It was the creation of life, a homunculus in the form of a knight. Whenever the protagonist fought alone, he was on the front lines. This was the main reason to focus on alchemy, to develop homunculus seeds. The problem was that each one costs nearly 100,000 in money. The demon sorceress charged at the new creature, to which Alec took the chance to set up barriers and protective spells to defend it. It reached the point where she became frustrated with how annoying and stubborn her opponent was. Thus, she activated the Impure Soul ability. It was a technique that decreased her health and increased her attack power. Considering that the woman shared the strength of her demon as well, she would be a complicated opponent. This time, her attack managed to chop the homunculus into bits, but it regenerated and then attacked her from behind. Alec laughed at the woman's surprised expression. Homunculi were magical creatures that operated with mental strength, so instead of healing, he recovered with mind potions. These were creatures that could not be revived if healing was attempted later. It was a gamble on his part, but the protagonist had prepared in advance for this moment. This time, it seemed he was one step ahead of his adversary. Considering that the witch was starting to tire from the effect of the impure soul, this was the opportunity he would have to finish the battle and fix the barrier. Alec sends his homunculus again, and the woman steps back to use demonic blood. With that, her wounds begin to heal with magic. It was the revelation that the witch never planned to defeat him to begin with. It was just her attempt to buy time until the demon lord was revived. The city would be in great trouble, not that it was her concern. Alec reflects that few people would be happy with the fall of Volks, and soon deduces that they were imperial soldiers, to which the woman replies that he was somewhat wrong, as they were not officers. As time passes, her opponent grows stronger and stronger. Checking on his allies, they all seem to be tiring even while giving their best. It was not enough for them to defeat them quickly. Alec could increase the number of homunculi, but even so, it wouldn't work. Suddenly, a voice announces that it would take care of this. It was the arrival of Henrietta with her brother and several knights. It was a true relief, although the witch leader recognized the duke's daughter. That did not affect Henrietta, who reminds her opponent of the difference in their combat power. Going against a paladin would certainly be a problem. It didn't take long for the protagonist to notice that the witch's skin returned to normal with the end of the assimilation. That was when the mage beside her began to use a vein of miasma. It was a technique that grants power to demons and damages other creatures. Immediately, the summoned demon attacks Henrietta's knights. It was the opportunity that the evil witch found to escape. It would be better to take a step back for her plan to work better. Finally, she introduces herself as Zero, the one who would bring despair to them, and they should remember that. After announcing herself, Zero disappears alongside her group. The duke's daughter even wanted to know who exactly those people were, but not even the protagonist could say. One way or another, they were agents of the Empire, and Zero seemed to hate it. For now, Polk recommends that they focus on the barrier, but it would take a long hour to be remade. The group would help Alec to do it, while Jilly and the others would keep watch. In parallel, Ryuto was worried because no other clan had arrived at the sanctuary yet. Since someone destroyed the barrier, there was a chance that White Wisdom would need help, and that's why they sent Henrietta. Within Volks, only Alec and Maria could revive the dead, but the woman alone could not effectively hold her ground in battle. In 20 minutes, the resurrection of the demon would happen. Ryuto tries to stay calm, as there was still enough time. That was when a voice shouted for them to look up. Above them, a huge rock fell from the skies. that large rock crashed down in the middle of the clan, destroying the seal. Soon, an evil laugh begins to echo through the forest. Immediately, the demon Duke is reborn, thanking the humans for their support. Somehow, his body still felt somewhat heavy, and Ryuto realizes it was the effect of the barrier working. Alec should have fixed it in time. In an instant, Duke understands that there were 4 seals around where he was. First, he could go out to destroy the barrier and take care of the city afterward. But before he could do that, the swordsman orders him to stop immediately. Despite the threats, the demon ignores him because he had more important things to do. It was not necessary for Ryuto to hasten his own death, and it would even be kind to give him the chance to escape. In front of those knights who remained in his way, Duke sighs. In that case, he would play with those fools and summons the great demons. Maria announces that they would perform the sacred enchantment and increase Ryuto's magical attack. His sword strikes were even praised by his opponent. Despite this, no matter how many attacked, Duke could bring more demons under his command. Ryuto wanted to avoid injuries when they had few healers. Therefore, he orders that they should take 3 monsters per clan. Everyone works together and thus the battle against the demons begins. They just had to hold on for a while until Alec and the others return. Duke could feel the power of the celestial dragon coming from Maria and approaches. Immediately, the clan leader turns around, worried. This was because before the battle, the protagonist told him to leave the Lord's seal in the hands of the priestess. Alec created a sealing stone with the power of the celestial dragon that would be more suitable to be kept with her. With that in mind, Ryuto positions himself in front of Maria to protect her. But it was not enough. The demon was faster in stealing the sealing stone, and at the same time, took the life of the priestess. Duke understands the reason a girl like her would be in the middle of such a battle. With this level of strength, it was laughable that they believed they could seal him again. Then, the demon breaks the stone and throws Maria's body aside. He was prepared to make each of them feel the deepest despair. When the protagonist's group arrived, the state of the battlefield was horrific. The scenes were too cruel for them to believe. Lorraine quickly found Maria on the ground, and Anna shouted for her brother to do something. Alec announced to the group that he would take care of reviving Maria. Jilly and the Silver Wyvern were to provide support so that the spell wouldn't be interrupted. Anna and the others would assist in the battle against the demon. Duke laughed because he knew Ryuto and his knights had reached their limit. Deep down, he should regret coming this far because this would be his death. The demon even taunted him that if he fled now, maybe some would survive. A voice called Ryuto in the midst of the discussion. It was Alec approaching Maria's body. He said he would take care of reviving her, so they should hold on to the fight just a little longer. These words motivated the leader, and he ordered his men to fall back to strengthen the defense. Although they were planning, Duke laughed at their attempts that would be futile. Then, he sent a demon in the direction of the protagonist. In that moment, Henrietta and her knights stepped in front to fight. The girl used the power of judgment against the creature, making it evaporate into the air. She felt proud of her power as a holy knight. Meanwhile, Alec assessed the terrible wound on the priestess's body. Remembering Mia, the young man was determined to successfully bring someone back to life, and he tried to calm himself as he began to use the spell. Alec's magic made Maria's body start functioning again. Immediately, he offered a mana potion so she could recover. Thus, the priestess herself used the miracle light magic to heal herself. Her power was to reproduce a true miracle. When activated, it could heal anything. It was a high-level healing spell, as expected from the Oracle rank clan. Maria realized as soon as she saw her state that she had been killed without even noticing. Meanwhile, the golden sword was in serious trouble. Although the girl wanted to go back and help, Alec asked her to do that later and lent her a cloak. That's when Maria noticed her clothes were torn and stepped aside to change. Finally, the protagonist ran to help Henrietta in the battle. Everyone worked together to bring down Duke, including Seth. Behind everyone, Alec used magic to inject energy into his companions. It was a strategy where everyone used their strongest abilities, and when their mana was drained, the protagonist shared his. After that, he himself swallowed several healing potions. This way, they could attack with full power without stopping. This was a method he had used while training with Guile, so there were no problems. It might have been inappropriate for Henrietta to say, but she was having a lot of fun. In the end, everyone was managing to fight freely. In light of this, Duke unleashed a poisonous gas spell, and Polk shouted for everyone to get away. In the game, it was a spell used when his HP fell below 75%. As he saw that those adventurers showed no sign of retreating, the demon decided to reveal his true power. It was his transformation, and Alec told the Holy Knights to activate the Blessing of Light. Everything would be fine as long as they stayed within the circle, thus avoiding the fatal attack. The knight positioned herself in the middle to push the demon back with her sword. It was a bold counterattack, but very well executed. It didn't take long for the poisonous mist to spread and surround Polk, who assured that he would be fine. He and other mages used barriers and magical veils to protect themselves. They were too close to succeeding. Just a little more, and they would defeat him. Even Duke didn't understand how mere humans were surviving all this. Furious, he launched an attack against the protagonist, knowing he was the biggest threat there. Alec was startled because he didn't even remember the demon being capable of such an attack. Jilly shouted in concern, but the one who stepped in front to protect him was Henrietta. Even after that, she asked him if he had been hurt. The protagonist froze in shock while the girl laughed at his reaction. With brute strength, Henrietta reminded him that she wouldn't allow him to have any scratches in battle. Somewhat nervous, Alec quickly used his healing magic. He was still shocked because that girl risked her own life. In the end, even with her clumsy personality, she was the leader of the Silver Wyvern after all. On the other hand, Alec wouldn't forget that scene anytime soon. Coming out of his thoughts, he prepared to finish the fight against the demon. Henrietta defended herself from Duke's next attacks with her shield. Then, Seth took the opportunity to hit him with magic, and the protagonist supported them by injecting energy once again. It didn't take long for his opponent to become more and more rigid with each passing moment. This was the vulnerability they had been waiting for. Finally, they were able to conjure a spell to bind the demon. As expected, Duke no longer had the strength to reflect. Or so he thought, for the creature immediately broke free, furious. Next, he summoned even more great demons to support him. The arrival of a new army disheartened the already exhausted adventurers. That was when the protagonist took the opportunity to bring forth more homunculi. They supported the hunt for the demons, and despite this weakening Alec's defense, he couldn't worry about that now. Before they could attack the demons, the knights were caught in a web that ensnared them. Duke laughed because he used the same spell to bind them in place. They would pay with their lives later. For now, they would just watch. The great target of the demon lord was Alec, who dodged the subsequent attacks. Even with Duke weakened, there was no opening for a counterattack. It didn't take long for the protagonist's legs to be ensnared as well. He tried to shoot fire arrows, which were easily avoided by the lord. Duke held him, ready to take his life, but Henrietta came to his rescue once again. Jilly shot an arrow that allowed his friend to escape the demon's grasp. This strategy left the lord dumbfounded, and Alec laughed because apparently this guy hadn't even learned the basic tactics. And next, it would be the Holy Knight who would deliver the grand finale of this battle. Henrietta received Alec's magical enhancement and used the power of judgment on Duke. Gradually, he disintegrated in the light and was defeated. At that moment, the demon realized that the fire arrow previously shot by the protagonist was not meant to hit him, but to free his companions. Seeing that he lost to humans made him laugh loudly. After all, his true power was nothing compared to this. Duke stared at Alec and commented on his eyes and hair, as well as his soul. Now he also understood what the faction of this city was up to. With a snap of his fingers, all the summoned demons were sent away, and to the shock of the adventurers, the Lord decided to be sealed again, obediently. Maria was worried because the sealing stone had already been destroyed. Duke remembered that there was another one with them, and Alec retrieved it again, noticing it was in his pocket. It was quite a sight, especially for the priestess who remembered that this stone had been destroyed. The protagonist explained that this was a low-purity prototype and would be very weak, or so it would be if it resisted, but Duke was agreeable to being sealed in this case. Alec was left wondering how he came to that conclusion, and the Lord said it was a way of consideration for having entertained him. The effect of the seal would last 50 years, and he would be eager to face him again in the future. The protagonist retorted that they would be making magical offerings, and his awakening would never happen again. Finally, Maria approached, and, alongside Alec, performed the sealing. In the meantime, Duke spoke with a young but older hero. There would be several tests awaiting him in the future, so he should overcome them and show the results he achieved. His last words were a prayer to the gods to protect him. Thus, the sealing of the demon lord came to an end, as did the great battle. Henrietta immediately threw herself to hug Alec, celebrating. The others also celebrated, relieved that everything had gone well. At that moment, he still asked Rouge about what he had said earlier regarding the god of light, Sirlan. It was strange for a demon to pray for protection from such superior beings. Certainly there was no way a creature of darkness could do such a thing, so perhaps it was just a provocation. Polk reflected that after everything, Duke named himself as the demon god. It was a strange type from beginning to end. One thing was the god of death, Slyn, who would be the polar opposite of Sirlan, the god of light. The only ones who prayed to Slyn were the people of the empire. This reflection made him wonder who exactly Alec was, after all. In the city, people commented on Duke the demon having been resurrected, and there were rumors that the leader of White Wisdom was the one who defeated him. The information spread quickly, and the Lord of Volks, Julius Pendragon, came to thank the protagonist. 5 days had passed since the great battle, and the protagonist only had the opportunity to meet Julius now. By his side was Watson, the master of the Mages Guild. The Lord shared that his children were deeply grateful for everything Alec had done for this city as well. He wished he had met him earlier, but he ended up having several other matters to resolve. But beyond that, he had to match the achievements of the clan leader. As a token of gratitude, Julius thought of promoting them to the golden rank and giving them an additional 100,000 in cash. Since then, Alec became more of a hero and less of a relative of Guile. It was obvious they wanted to keep him as a symbol of Volks. The protagonist accepts the rewards as he had nothing special he wanted. Besides the thanks, Julius wanted to offer apologies about his village of origin. This was because the attack on that village was his responsibility. The village was surrounded by a forest inhabited by monsters, but its location was near the Empire and could serve as a shortcut to the royal capital. Then there was Guile, who withdrew as an adventurer to live in the village and keep the Empire under observation. The village chief, Billy, and the hunter, William, were in the same position. Alec was surprised to hear so many details. After all, it had seemed focused only on combat before, but there were political motives involved as well. Currently, the management of the village was entrusted to the eldest son and the next lord, Abel Pendragon, brother of Henrietta and Paul. The protagonist reflects on how none of the brothers mentioned before becoming lord. However, Abel did not report Giles' passing 7 years ago. This mistake was a problem, but the official responsible for reporting to the lord was replaced by someone else. There's a chance this third party tampered with the information. This makes Alec question whether Abel might have concealed this to protect the country, and Julius responds that he does not know for sure if it was out of necessity or incompetence. When the father questioned the son, the young man saw no reason for such a discussion about a death. These words made Julius reprimand Abel, as the village was of great importance to the country. To be honest, even the Lord did not think he had such skill or even cared about the country, unlike Henrietta, who was more competent and patriotic. In any case, Julius acknowledged the mistake for not having checked things with Abel beforehand. It seemed that the large rock that fell and destroyed the demon sanctuary was a known magic. It was a skill called meteor fall that mages of the Empire often used. In other words, there must be infiltrated spies. Alec immediately remembers Zero and asks if they knew anything about the demon summoners. The Lord replies that they should be those called the Special Forces of Cerberus. It was just a nickname, but there's a rumor that the Imperial Army takes orphans with black hair and trains them as soldiers. These children were trained with magic and learned to become sorcerers, surviving and treated as soldiers. The survival rate until adulthood was less than 10%. This makes Alec understand the reason for Zero's hatred towards him. It was not generally known, but hair color was linked to magical attributes. Blonde was more common among the nobility, blessed with light magic. Brown hair for people with earth attributes. Blue hair for water attributes, red hair found in desert regions with fire attributes, and green hair was for wind attributes, common among elves. Thinking back, Alec remembers several he saw and knew with different colored hair. Meanwhile, black hair was related to the shadow attribute and the nobility of the Kaz Empire. Unlike the kingdom, the empire had this color as a mark of nobility. It was a land not only cold and poor, but filled with monsters. Without the power to kill them, one could not survive in that environment. Since then, those with black hair became nobles and built the empire known today. This makes Alec reflect on his own origins. After all, his grandfather never said anything about it. Julius retorts that if it were a concern, Guile may have judged it was not the right time to speak. But soon, he would be building a fortress next to the destroyed village. If the village is attacked, it means the empire knew the location and they could not leave things as they were. Finally, the conversation ends, and Alec thanks the two for their visit that day. The Lord was equally grateful, hoping the protagonist continues to get along with Henrietta. Later, while walking the streets, Alec ran into Joey. He finished his shopping, and they ended up walking together, discussing their next objective. They were thinking of going to the Forgotten Island, where there would be a dungeon. Next, Alec intended to acquire the items to become a necromancer. On this day, after hearing Watson talk about hair colors, he realized it was quite fitting for that profession. Suddenly, they noticed that the streets are quite noisy near the clan. At the entrance of the house, there were two men wanting to enter and claiming to be friends of the protagonist. Hastel sees them as suspicious since their leader was famous and the weirdos always showed up. Even Anna said she did not know them, and it was just when Alec approached to see what was happening. The two men try to make him remember who they were, but the protagonist has no idea. They laugh because they were forgotten after leaving the village when they were so young. Then, Alec finally remembers the brothers Dory and Gran who went to the capital to become adventurers. In the end, they were able to enter the mansion to talk. Dory was a swordsman who uses spells and Gran a paladin. The others feel tense, but greet them anyway. Dory jokes with Jilly because he has grown, but remains the same shy person as always. The protagonist is curious to know the reason for their visits, and they tell him that the people in the city had been talking a lot about the clan leader and they decided to pay a visit. Moreover, they heard about the fall of the village and wanted to know the truth. The brothers are super curious to see Anna as soon as they learned she was Mia's little sister. They acknowledge that her life must have been quite difficult since then, and they even promise that they would help her if she ever needed help. The two left the village and did not plan to return, but losing all of this still felt wrong. Still, they are happy that Alec and the other two are alive. As usual, both were excited as always, but the fact that they wanted to cooperate with the protagonist catches him by surprise. This is because Dory and Gran wanted to join the clan. Rouge is curious to know if they were the so-called twin swords known in the capital. He heard that even without being from a clan, the two were golden rank fighters. Whether on the front lines or behind, swordsmen and mages, their coordination in combat was perfect. Alec was impressed that those two had worked so hard since then. The brothers comment on each other, laughing and proud of themselves. In the end, their lively vibe was the same as when they were just kids. If Alec were to be honest, having two advanced class members was appreciated, and above all, they were perfect swordsman types. Even though they had grown up, Rouge alone would not be enough as a guardian. During the incident with Duke, victory was only possible thanks to the presence of other clans. Besides, their energetic personalities could help keep the clan's spirits up. Alec asked if they had no interest in other clans besides theirs, and the two boast that they had been requested but turned everyone down. Moreover, they knew the protagonist very well and knew they could trust him. Even Jilly had to agree that Alec was someone who knew what he was doing. That surprised the protagonist. It was the first time his friends seemed so cheerful since they left the village. Thinking about it, there were hardly any people who knew what the village was like back then. In that case, Alec agreed, but he would still have to test the brothers' skills. The two would accompany them to the dungeon on the Forgotten Island, the Labyrinth of the Ged. And of course, both agreed right away. Rouge is curious to know what would happen with the rest of the team there, and the protagonist reflects on what to do, as everyone could go together. At that moment, Jilly says that only 4 people should go. Taking so many people would put Alec in a complicated position. Besides, there were rumors about the swordsman brothers in the capital, both almost level 40. An improvised team with such a level difference would be dangerous. The protagonist had to agree, especially since the idea was to test Dory and Gran in action. Anna is worried about how long they would be away and asks them to be careful. Then, the group gathers and takes a boat for their trip to the island. The Forgotten Island was a bit far from Volks. It seemed that the followers of the god of darkness Slain lived there before, and the underground temple became the Labyrinth of the Dead. The dungeon was feared by people. The goal was to defeat the boss and obtain his Book of the Dead, which would allow Alec to become a necromancer. Inside the dungeon there was a labyrinth, and if they descended in a spiral, they would reach the lowest floor. There were 3 Lynches and Dullahans, but the boss was an old Lich. The brothers knew that this boss was immune to status changes and had problematic abilities. Alec had dealt with monster abilities before, so it should be fine. If they moved without getting lost, they should be able to pass without major problems. The group makes their journey and soon enters the dungeon. As soon as they encountered the skeletons, Dory and Gran dealt heavy damage to them. Their reactions were great. They had clearly trained a lot over the years. Just as Rouge said, those two were good at what they did. To start, the spell swordsman would stay back while the paladin would remain behind casting support magic. When Dory attacks, Gran moves to take his place, and they alternate. The brothers were able to cover each other's weaknesses and knew when to change their movements. His skills were all used with perfect timing. Despite this, the brothers laughed because they wanted to have at least brought the girls to make it a bit more exciting. This makes Jilly sigh as their personalities were quite the opposite of their powers. It was possible that Lorraine hated this dungeon, and the brothers laughed, imagining her being scared. Alec mentioned having heard that by reading the Book of the Dead, one could learn the profession. At this rate, the old Lich would be easy even if they acted on their own. Thus, the group descended and conquered the dungeon with great ease. In the end, they were able to reach the last floor. There seemed to be no more staircases, and Alec was surprised at how quickly they arrived. The quartet opened the doors and entered the boss room, where the Book of the Dead was. As soon as they approached, the Lich appeared laughing at the foolish humans who had invaded his room. The monster was ready to make them sacrifices for his god. But of course the battle ended in the blink of an eye. It wasn't even a challenge for the brothers. Alec just watched this in disbelief at what he witnessed. If they had been with Hastel and the others, everyone would have been exhausted from the long battle, but Dory and Gran didn't even lose their breath. And of course, the protagonist let them join the clan. He had no complaints to make. But even though they were powerful, the two had very balanced types. They were good against enemies like mid-rank opponents and bosses, but high-level opponents would end up making the fights dragged out. In the end, dealing with much more powerful monsters would depend on teamwork with offensive power and defense. Finally, Alec went to get the item they had come so far to retrieve. Now he would finally have the chance to become a necromancer. Thinking back, his class when he played Chronicles of Discard was necromancer. That was the main reason he wanted to use it again. The more time he spent in this world, the stronger his desire became. Perhaps it was related to the fact that his black hair connected with his power. But before he could open the Book of the Dead, everyone turned confused by a loud noise coming from the door. A monster appeared clapping, congratulating them on the splendid battle. They were younger than expected, but that didn't matter. Alec couldn't believe what he was seeing. This undead was not an ordinary monster. It was the greatest boss of all within the game. This guy was the Lord of Death, yet he was still in a mediocre dungeon. The god noticed he was recognized, which made things simpler. Now, he ordered the adventurers to take their weapons and prove their strength. Gran asked what the plan was this time, but the protagonist was tense. The Lord of Death was very strong. It usually required a special ability called Enstra as soon as a necromancer reached maximum level to defeat him. Everyone in the group had to be in advanced classes and well-equipped. No matter how you looked at it, it was impossible for them to win alone. Alec remembered having the return scroll. If he had the chance, he could use it to teleport. And at that moment, the god warned that they couldn't escape. This area was under his control. It was clear they would end up being swept out of the dungeon if the fight happened. It had been a while since the god of death had visitors, and it would make everything quite fun. He began by using the Cursed Field, which prohibited healing magic. Alec knew it was a skill used by the Abyss Child. A Lord of Death shouldn't be able to use dark magic. Then, the monster used the triple spell, now a specific magic of sorcerers. That creature was capable of using even demonic art and invocations. This was madness. Alec knew it was impossible to defeat this undead. But before the battle began, the protagonist asked for permission to ask a question. This interruption made the god laugh, allowing him to speak, and Alec questioned what his intentions were in showing powers he normally couldn't use. He was clearly testing their reactions when monsters shouldn't have such types of knowledge. The protagonist wanted to know if he was a human who reincarnated as an undead in this world. Immediately, the god clapped. For such a young person, this conclusion was impressive. However, he wondered what kind of answer he should offer now. Alec wondered if he should say he was a reincarnated one too, to make him react. Instead, he asked if the undead knew the wise Yahello, stating that he was his grandfather and was responsible for teaching him so much about this world. Immediately, the god of death knew the protagonist was lying. He clearly didn't believe it. He seemed to be mocked. This was because the god himself never offered any knowledge of sorcery to Yahello. Thus, it was impossible for that god to know so many details. To begin with, the wise one was the type who learned through experience and not by theory. There was no way to have made a successor like Alec, and the protagonist asks if the undead knew his grandfather. That was when he revealed that Yahello was his disciple. It had been 50 years since he left his side, however. Then, Alec remembers how Yahello and Watson were adopted by a man who was his master, and the undead continues talking about his story when he was still human. This guy developed the secret art of reincarnation and used various techniques with the knowledge of his past life. Thanks to that, he abandoned his human body and reincarnated as an undead. This was far from the answer Alec expected to hear. Still, the god of death wanted to know how the protagonist gained such knowledge. Even Joey didn't understand what was being discussed. Noticing the wizard's tension, the god uses magic and makes his companions fall. They were not dead, just unconscious. Now it was just the two of them, so they could speak the truth. Alec felt he was in serious trouble. He had spoken more than he should have. Unlike Duke, there was no way for someone to appear to save them, and no one would resurrect them. Finally, Alec confesses that he reincarnated there from another world. Like the undead, he had memories of his previous life. Previously, this world was a game known as Chronicles of Discard. It was a game with cities and abilities, and that's why he had knowledge that others did not possess. In this, the god of death asks if by any chance the protagonist had read the true Bible. Given Alec's confused reaction, the undead can't believe he knows such information without having consulted it. Finally, he invokes the book to start opening the pages and reading. But what caught the protagonist's attention was that the writing was in Japanese. The undead notices that Alec could read the sacred writing. It took years of research, and he couldn't even decipher its pages. However, the god of death is very happy because it was a great twist of fate. On the other hand, Alec was confused about how such a book could be there. The information for each profession was described in detail. This was a strategy guidebook for use in the game. The undead tells that this was actually a copy of the true Bible. The things written on those pages had never been seen in any other book. Then, the protagonist explains that it was the language of his old world. If one were to interpret the situation, it must be possible that another reincarnated person brought it there. Perhaps it was left behind, and the people revered it as a sacred text. In that case, the god of death comments on the church's scriptures. It praised the god Serlin, and every job, skill, and magic guaranteed to the people came from this entity. However, none of this seemed correct because monsters also have powers. This was a convenient and false tale created by the church to hide the truth. If necessary, they could conclude that the Bible in their hands was the true one. Alec feels that the undead was almost a teacher, which makes sense considering he was his grandfather's master. Since he passed away and Lily disappeared, it had been a long time since he received teachings from anyone. There were two different purposes for the existence of these versions of the story. The church's scripture spreads the greatness of Serlan, showing the legitimacy of the religion and increasing its followers, while the other Bible preserves knowledge. There was no ideology or mentions of divine beings, just accounts. Suddenly, the book disappears from the protagonist's hands, ending up in the skeletons. The original Bible was unknown, and how it came to humanity was a mystery. As far as was known, each nation and its royal family possessed a copy of this book. A large part of their content was the same, but 10% differed. In the Pendragon Kingdom, there were classes of swordsmen and guardians. In the Kaz Empire, the classes of dark mages. In the Wyvern Kingdom, the classes related to beast tamers. In the Atlantis Kingdom, the classes related to the ocean, and in the Sacred Kingdom, priests and sages. Each country has its own information about its classes, and they were different, as if someone wanted to separate them. The reason for creating such differences was still unknown. Only the gods would know. The available strategies always vary from country to country. Alec says that if there was an intention behind it, then the distribution of books and professions would also change the way battles are fought. As soon as the undead deduces they were talking about possible wars, the protagonist explains that it was just a possibility. Despite that, it was a unique perspective. In this way, many things would make sense. If they could read with such a premise, much would be interpreted differently, and the missing parts would be complete. As soon as the skeleton invoked several copies of the other Bibles, Alec asks to wait. Even though he was fine cooperating with the research, he still had lives to maintain there. In light of this, the skeleton agrees and offers a ring to the wizard. It was a teleportation item that would allow them to return to the entrance of the dungeon. On the other hand, the god wanted it to be visited once a month and threatens them if they refuse to fulfill their part of the deal. As soon as the rest of the group woke up, they were frightened to have lost consciousness. Then Alec tries to explain that somehow they were cooperating with the monster now. In that, he explains to the adventurers that he was an ancient human. Still, neither Dory nor Gran can believe it, although it makes sense being Giles' master. Finally, Alec asks the name of the undead as he would love to be able to address him properly. And he introduces himself as Gall Black, a name long lost to history. As Alec tries to introduce himself alongside his friends, Gall refuses to listen. From then on, only one of them would be involved with his research, but more importantly, he should focus on becoming a necromancer. The master had no interest in humans changing professions, but was interested in those from another world. The protagonist takes a deep breath and finally picks up the Book of the Dead. As he opens it, he realizes that the writings were not in Japanese. The contents and formulas for necromancy were all written down. If he could use the magic there, then bringing the dead back to life would be possible. This makes him wonder if he has now perfected the technique. Until suddenly a voice congratulates him for having acquired the ability to communicate with the dead, startling him. This was the voice that was only in Alec's mind, and no one else could hear it. From then on, that new ability would be set as passive. When he was younger, this voice always helped him understand things and answered questions. With the communication of the dead, Alec would be able to visualize spirits and feel their appearances, and depending on his level, the range of communication would increase. It would grow the more it was used, so he needed to frequently use his necromancer power. Communication with the dead has the potential to evolve, but several conditions were necessary for that. But upon evolving, the effects would become more potent. The voice concludes the explanation and prays for his good luck in battle to continue. These words leave Alec surprised, but he barely has time to process them. Gaul came to check if the protagonist managed to finish using the book, and his companions celebrate his new achievement. As Alec turns around, he stops immediately when he looks at the undead. Jilly is confused and tries to shake his friend, worried about what he was seeing. Then the protagonist points behind Gaul to Mia's spirit. He approaches to try to hear her voice. Maybe she has insults or anger to direct, but nothing happens, and Alec tries to explain to the others that he could see her, but the spirit says nothing. As he didn't know what Mia wanted to tell him, the protagonist can only fall to his knees and cry. Gaul realizes that he has started to see souls, which is interesting because he had never heard of such an ability before, and he asks the protagonist if he thought he could summon this soul. If he had perfected the art of necromancy, it would be possible to call a soul from the dead. After all, he should want to know what she had to say to him. That was what the power of necromancers existed for. Alec hesitates before agreeing to do it, immediately using his power on Mia. Then a skeleton resembling the girl appears, frightening the others. Gaul reflects that generally, skeletons would be summoned 5 at a time, but there was only one soul, and it could be said that it was a special case. Alec quickly checks if the undead can speak, but there is no response. Finally, he ends up canceling the magic. Perhaps it was a failed attempt. Necromancy was, at its core, the art of binding souls to obey their summoner, and the god of death thought it would be possible to use it to communicate. That's when Alec remembers his unique ability. Perhaps the reason for seeing Mia now was that this power amplified when he became a necromancer. Again, this was another ability that Gaul had never heard of. Who knows, if the protagonist gets stronger, he could use it to communicate with Mia. It was worth a try, and the protagonist would count on the help of the master wizard for the experiment. Jilly and the others wanted to help him on this journey, which makes Alec happy to have them there. Finally, Gaul wraps up the conversation and sends the whole group back to the beginning of the dungeon. This time, they would have to conquer the labyrinth of dead a second time, now with several enemies more powerful than the originals. If they went all the way to the bottom, it should be enough for their levels to increase. With that, the protagonist is motivated to make this effort to talk to Mia. This time, there were skeleton generals strategically placed in the labyrinth. Alec uses his own summoning to bring some knights. Jilly soon noticed he was using that staff they recovered from underground. It was an item that doubles the number of summons, although it only works with skeletons. Death blessings enhance the abilities of the summoned. A single knight couldn't defeat a general. That's why Alec sent several of them with those boosts applied. The brothers comment that those troops were quite powerful for outnumbering. It was like witnessing a real war happening before their eyes. Even more monsters were coming, so this time the adventurers unite to fight. It didn't take long for the protagonist's necromancer level to increase, and he tries to summon his skeleton again. As there was no sign of voice, Alec decided to keep getting stronger. More time passes and the group repeats the process, defeating creatures and trying to summon the spirit of the deceased girl. Even humans could see her human form, although they couldn't distinguish her face. She doesn't move or react, even after they reach the halfway point of the dungeon. As they proceed, Jilly suggests to the protagonist that they take a break. Since Alec was in a hurry, Gran agrees with the hunter that they would have plenty of time to finish the maze. It was probably midnight outside, so they could sleep and eat something. Alec was still on the 5th level and knew he couldn't stay in there forever. Maybe he had pushed himself a bit too far recently. The battles had always gone well, and the clan thrived to the point of making him forget his anger, and he wonders what Mia's spirit could want to say to him. Meanwhile, Anna was worried as it had been a week since her brother left. Rouge heard they would return in 2 days, but much more time had passed. It was the first time the girl had been separated from Alec for such a long period. Lorraine tries to calm them down and says everything would be fine. Maybe something happened, but their leader was quite strong and nothing dangerous would happen. Despite her efforts to say this, Anna noticed the thief was lying. Everyone there was feeling quite anxious. Suddenly, someone arrived to alert that the group of adventurers returned safely. At that moment, the girl jumped from the dining table and ran to the entrance door. However, as soon as she saw the state of the group, she stopped immediately. Everyone looked exhausted and disheartened, especially Alec. The protagonist walked straight past Anna without even noticing her and greeted her only a little later. The girl even asked what happened as he seemed scared, and the protagonist replied it was nothing, explaining they would need to leave again as soon as they had their supplies ready again. But before he could walk away, Anna held him back and asked to let her go with them this time. Alec turned and told her not to be so selfish. They didn't have the luxury of that kind of thing right now, and she should understand. At that moment, the girl let go of him, scared and in shock, but aware that something very bad had happened for her brother to change so much. Anna still remembered Alec telling them to get stronger together, and how he always helped her. Even when she failed in training or when the clan was in trouble, her brother always smiled and tried to fix things. That's why she was so disheartened by the kind of look he had now. At that moment, Anna realized her help would be completely useless. Hastel was confused about what happened and also why no one was protesting their leader's behavior. The first person to interrupt this tense atmosphere was Lorraine, who slapped Alec in the face. She questioned through tears what her boss was doing. After all, Anna had waited for him all this time without being able to eat or sleep from so much worry. She scolded him for forgetting the reason he worked so hard until today, which was precisely to protect that little girl and his new family. The thief didn't know what happened, but abandoning his family didn't suit her leader. Seeing her defend so much made Anna start to cry, moved. Finally, Alec dropped his staff and apologized to his sister, as he almost made a mistake again. He made her worried and apologized for that, even though he had decided to lean on her before. Even worse than that, he ended up hurting her out of pure selfishness. In the end, Anna ran and hugged him, welcoming him properly this time at home. The others sighed in relief as the tense atmosphere was resolved. Alec thanked Lorraine for making him wake up and finally asked them to listen to what happened in the Dungeon of the Dead. And also, he wanted to tell them about his secret. He revealed that he was not from this world and reincarnated as a transmigrator. It was a world of more advanced civilization and so distant that no one could reach it. In this place, there was a game based on this world, and that was the true reason for knowing more than others about extra details. Alec didn't tell even Jilly and hoped they would be surprised, but the hunter didn't seem very shocked. Sometimes the protagonist said things that caught his attention, and he could notice he was a different guy than usual. Even the others didn't show much surprise. After all, their leader was extraordinary and it made sense to have such a background. Even for Dory and Graham, this changes nothing, because Alec was still born and raised with them in the village. Now that this matter is resolved, the protagonist returns to the main topic. After they finished the Labyrinth of the Dead, he, now a necromancer, achieved the profession and unlocked his new ability to speak with the dead. Alec always felt a presence, and with this power was able to discover its origin. It would be easier to show everyone, and so he begins by summoning a ghost. A human figure appeared before them, and Lorraine mentions it being a cute girl. Anna quickly recognizes Mia and freezes in shock. She runs to try to talk to her, apologizing and telling her how she wanted to see her for so long. The protagonist comments that Mia seemed to want to tell him something. Perhaps it was a regret, but he was still unable to converse with her spirit. Being weak, they tried to advance quickly in the dungeon for days, and he was still unable to reach his goal. While Alec laments, Anna retorts that none of this was necessary. After all, she could understand her sister's feelings. It was obvious that Mia was worried about her old friend, because Alec always pushes himself too hard and even in the afterlife would leave her worried. Therefore, what Mia probably wanted to communicate was a request for him to take better care of himself. The protagonist is shocked and wonders if that was really all. It would make sense since that girl never blamed him for being weak, quite the opposite. She always tried to protect him, and reflecting on it makes him promise that he would never put himself at the limit again. Thus, he wouldn't make Mia worry, so now she could rest in peace. Mia's spirit approaches and hugs Alec, who was crying. He had always been trapped all this time, fleeing from his true self and forcing himself to live according to others' ideals. But now, he was able to walk his own path, not for someone else and not out of regret, but to live for himself. Alec was deeply grateful to everyone for this, including Mia for teaching him that. That night, the protagonist sat down to talk with Anna and Jilly. It had been a long time since just the three of them talked. The hunter starts by apologizing for not putting himself in the middle before for the girl. Just as his friend wanted to understand Mia's feelings, Jilly himself wanted to as well. If the deceased could speak and they could treat her as alive, who knows, they might be together again. He foolishly clung to that hope. Jilly knew he should have been the only one to stop Alec, although he himself tries to refuse those words. In fact, precisely because his friend told him he was a reincarnated, he felt he should open up more too. So he tells the two there that he always had feelings for Mia. It was no wonder they were surprised, as he had hidden it for a long time. In fact, Anna says she knew because it was as clear as day, shocking Alec with her lack of sensitivity. Even the protagonist agrees he knew all along, perhaps even Mia herself knew, and Anna confirms her suspicions, but her older sister asked her not to mention anything so as not to hurt the hunter. In the end, that absent-minded attitude of the girl was simply a way to gauge their reactions. Jilly sighs, realizing he worried too much all this time for nothing. The protagonist laughs because in that sense the two were quite similar. Finally, Anna mentions that now that Alec has managed to overcome Mia, maybe he can look for a new girlfriend now. He notes that the girl must be worried if someone takes the place of her deceased sister, and Alec promises that he doesn't plan to look for anything now. After all, his family would always come first. Anna makes him promise that and hopes he won't be deceived by some weird woman. She was determined because she received Mia's trust to take care of Alec. From then on, she would watch over him so he never goes back on his words. A few days pass and the protagonist returns to the labyrinth of the dead. As soon as he picked up the ring, he was teleported to the back of the dungeon immediately. Gaul asks right away if they would continue with the hunt from the other day, but soon notices that the soul of that girl ascended to the other world, which was a shame. The study of communication with the dead would have to be postponed. Despite everything, Alec thanks him for the consideration and was ready to help him with the book research, but the undead says he can go home now. Seeing him gave him a new idea for studies, and so the undead simply expelled the protagonist from the dungeon. Alec sighs at how much Gaul lacked consideration, but feels relieved not to be stuck there. Maybe he can occupy himself with the clan's requests now. Back in the city, Melissa offered several missions, but none of them caught Alec's attention. She mentions there have been some reports of dragons near the royal capital these days. This makes the protagonist wonder if it could be the rumored invasion of the red dragon he heard about, coming directly from the Wyvern Kingdom. But it was the kind of request that was super difficult, so Alec declines to the assistant's disappointment. Then, she suggests they could try the islands of Atlantis. It was an archipelago where the festival of the water god would take place in 10 days, and they could take the opportunity for a little vacation. This was an event where one could obtain water attribute equipment, and the targets there were quite weak as well. The idea pleases Alec, and Melissa gets excited to prepare her things too, although she was immediately rejected from participating, left aside in her office. In Alec's past life, he was always bedridden and never had the chance to travel. He could leave the preparations for Mary for the new trip and had to gather information on nearby hunting grounds. Reflecting on this makes him quite excited for what might come next. The White Wisdom was a promising new clan that was promoted to gold rank 6 months after its founding. Now, its members were all on vacation at the beach. Hastel never thought they would actually enjoy their time on a big island. Even Rouge was surprised by the leader's proposal, especially since they were staying at a noble resort. He even thought they would be taken to a cave again, but Alec thought it would be fun to do different things once in a while. Even Henrietta was happy with the weather being perfect for a trip. For this expedition, the Duke's daughter and Seth were accompanying them. Once, her father had said it was a special mission for the White Wisdom, and she was forbidden from participating. But after the girl made a scene, Julius gave in and personally went to the White Wisdom's house to ask for permission. In the end, that man was less a lord and more a father, but at least the travel costs were covered by Julius. Polk stayed to take care of things in place of his sister while she went off to travel. And this made Alec remember that Henrietta also had an older brother. That was Abel, and he asked the girl what kind of person that man was. Henrietta tells him that her brother was the next lord and was always studying hard while the other 2 brothers took care of protecting the people. It was clear that she adored Abel, believing he was a man with a good heart. Given her reaction, it was likely she didn't even know about the case of the destroyed village. In that moment, the princess saw an activity in the water that caught her attention, called surfing. On the other hand, Anna came to try to steal Alec's attention, and that made him get pulled from side to side. In the end, the group made their way to the hotel, where they got their rooms for their stay. They were looking forward to this, but the place was really fancy. The protagonist explains to the group that the next day they would have free time and wanted to check out the ruins. Henrietta and Anna immediately offer to go. On the 3rd day, they would have a bit of entertainment with light hunting, although for the others it didn't seem like something light to do. On the 4th day, the main event was the Festival of the Water God, and it was the big hunting day. The targets were goblin-sized jellyfish that were quite easy to attack. And in the afternoon of the 5th day, they would return home by ship. Hastel is curious to know why they had to hunt the jellyfish if they weren't dangerous. Alec reminds them that they hadn't been able to participate in the dragon event last time due to the incident with the Demon Duke. On the other hand, defeating the jellyfish during the Water Goddess's festival would give them magical stones. They can be collected and used to make all kinds of useful equipment. They were quite good for nullifying fire attacks. With everyone's level there, it should be possible to obtain unique class weaponry. While the group discussed, Seth soon came to call them for dinner. Everyone enjoyed the meal, amazed at how delicious it was. And suddenly the time for dancing was announced, and Alec wonders if this performance was samba. One of the dancers even dragged Rouge onto the stage, with Lorraine just laughing at his face. Although the guy was really good at dancing to the point of seeming like a hidden hobby of the noble. In the end, they were making happy memories. The second day started with all of them going to the beach. Lorraine was the happiest person there. Meanwhile, Hastel and Rouge were perfectly fine under the beach umbrella, not wanting to move at all. Despite this, the girls soon noticed that the number of beautiful people there was staggering. Everyone there were rich people who shone with charm. On the other hand, she herself didn't feel like much. In the past, Lorraine never even thought about playing in the sea. She was always more concerned with gathering food and was skinny to the bones. It always made her feel inferior to the common girls when she saw them on the streets. Reflecting on it, maybe she has recently become more feminine than before. Meanwhile, Jilly was receiving advice from his brothers on how to approach girls. The two knew that their friend hadn't confessed to his crush until the end and clearly hadn't gotten over Mia. The point was that he had to try to move on a little. The two pushed Jilly towards some girls who were at the bar. The first thing he does is analyze each of them and their professions. The shortest one was a mage, the second one a backline class, and the third probably a swordswoman. But the first person he approached was a guy, leaving both Dory and Gran confused. In fact, this man had stolen the wallet of one of the girls. After chasing the thief away, the shortest girl came to thank Jilly. She even wanted to thank him with a meal, but he just walked away. The brothers complained about how the idiot Jilly just left with the coolest walk in the world when he should have stayed and accepted that he was naturally popular. On the other hand, Alec's group was touring the ruins. The guide explains that the place ahead of them was the temple of the water god. Long ago, Sir Lan created the gods who control water, earth, fire, wind, and vacuum, and they were called the 5 dragons. Anna knew that this story was in the scriptures too. The 5 dragons were bound to the lands and blessed the people. Alec reflects that the sky dragon in Volk was part of these 5 dragons, probably the vacuum dragon. They are guided into the temple to the place where they offer magical energy. If they touched the gem of the statue, their magic would be offered. Henrietta and Anna approach, admiring how that stone begins to shine. The protagonist does the same, curious to see how much it changes depending on the energy, and at that moment the gem shines so brightly that they have to close their eyes. The guide enters all confused and is surprised by the amount of magical power there. According to the legend, if a lot of magical energy is offered, the stone would turn blue and bless the one who made the offering. The guide even thanks Alec for making his offering and guides them out of the place. During the 3rd day, they headed to the uninhabited island. The only monster living there was the coconut crabs that left behind cheap items. Henrietta asks why they have to hunt them, and the protagonist comments on the crab soup they had last night. The dish cost almost 1,000 in cash and was a refined tasting food. The idea was to enjoy that meal when they returned home too, so they would hunt some crabs. Hunting normally would be boring, so Alec would split teams to compete. Now Joey understands why his friend called the hunt fun. The winning team would get the soup dishes first and the losers would go without the snack. The divisions were quite simple. Alec grouped all the beginner class members into one group. Henrietta felt hurt for not being included, and Seth reminded her that she couldn't join after all. She promised her father that she wouldn't get involved in any battle activities. They couldn't risk the girl getting hurt, which made her sigh. Then, Alec offered to show her a bit of his power in exchange for her standing there. It would only be this once, which seemed to satisfy her for now. Finally, the groups were sent to catch the crabs. The competition would last 2 hours. Just while the groups were doing the work of hunting the crabs, the protagonist made his skeleton summoning. He used his power to participate in the competition too, including his homunculi. Even his companions were shocked at how proactive Alec was. Henrietta was amazed by the protagonist's new power. Meanwhile, the others complained that their leader was stealing by using his army to hunt in his place. For some reason, he was actually competing, although Jilly doesn't seem as excited as his friend. Lorraine complains because there should be fair competitions, but Alec made things worse. Rouge laughed, mentioning that it was rare for their leader to be so involved in these games. Maybe now that the problems with his old lover have been resolved, he has allowed himself to relax. It didn't take long for the thief to notice that there was a jellyfish on the rocks. What also caught her attention was that the creature was trapped between the stones. She feels sorry for the monster, although Rouge hopes they won't be attacked after helping it. The two work together and lift the stone, helping the jellyfish. Once freed, it returns to the ocean and even waves at them in thanks. Lorraine even finds it somewhat cute and notices that the noble beside her was quiet. That's because he is a bit worried that the girl might hunt those jellyfish considering how much she liked them. While Lorraine was entering an internal debate, Alec's team won the competition in the most unfair way possible. On the 4th day, the great festival of the water god had arrived. Henrietta was surprised because it started quite early in the morning. The other adventurers were still competitive from the previous day due to the rewards from the magic stones. The princess cheers for the group as they await the arrival of the jellyfish. They soon begin to appear and flood the beach where they were. Alec was the first to attack the monsters using magic. The messenger of the water god never counterattacks, but on the other hand, weak attacks wouldn't have any effect. They needed to take down each one of them with a single hit. After finishing one of them, the protagonist obtained a fragment. It was necessary to collect 10 of them to form a single magic stone. With hundreds of them, it would be possible to obtain equipment, but given how long it would take an eternity to accumulate them. If they summoned skeletons like the previous day, the beach would probably turn into a mess. In the end, they had no choice but to fight this way. Thus, the adventurers worked to defeat the monsters on their own. Anna points to those still in the water and asks if they should focus on them too. Alec agrees, explaining that the larger jellyfish not only leave fragments but magic stones directly. The protagonist shouts to the group that the large jellyfish was fighting back, and they had to be careful. Of course, Dory and Graham loved the challenge and ran off to defeat it first. Hastel went to help them, and as expected, the creature countered their moves, but it was soon defeated when he hit it with a Hadouken. The protagonist thinks he did a great job countering the counterattack with his skill. It was highly efficient. The rest were still doing their job collecting fragments in parts, teaming up in groups. Lorraine, on the other hand, for some reason was having serious difficulties attacking them. Later, they had collected a good amount of magic stones. Still, Alec was impressed that the magic of the water god could be summoned infinitely this way while dealing with the jellyfish. Suddenly, someone shouted at a silhouette that appeared from the water. It was a jellyfish, simply enormous to the point that they had to lift their heads to see it. Jilly asked if this would be prey too. Perhaps it was a boss of the area. The brothers quickly get excited and charge at it, ready to defeat it and claim the prize. But at the same moment, they are sent flying away. Even Jilly's arrows have no effect. Anna's spells are countered, and Rouge came to protect her with his shield. Lorraine asks how they should defeat that thing, and Alec reflects on it. Large enemies with high defense deal common damage, so the only way to hit their weak point was through their element. It was necessary to enchant the weaponry first. While Rouge defends and Anna attacks, Alec could strengthen everyone's weapons. Just as he was thinking about the strategy, he saw that Hastel was going around the large creature. As soon as he tried to attack it, the protagonist shouted for the others to get away. In that moment, Hastel used the Hadouken against the jellyfish and pierced it with great power. The problem was that the creature's fluids fell on the heads of everyone nearby. It was a true disaster and made the whole beach dirty. Hastel was all happy because they managed to get several stones, while Rouge complained to the idiot who caused this chaos. Alec was somewhat shocked. After all, it was only with brute force that the martial artist defeated the monster, proving just how strong he had become. Maybe it was time to promote some of them to a higher class. Henrietta hurriedly appeared to congratulate the group on their victory. She explains that they were offering exchanges of stones for equipment at a nearby tent. The protagonist went ahead to check what was available, and then he realizes that he didn't just have equipment but other accessories as well. Finally, the 5th day arrived, and it was their last one in the archipelago. After the battle, everyone was exhausted and rested during the night. Before leaving, they exchanged magical stones for their prizes. They mentioned that the monster's bodily fluids would dry up on their own, and they shouldn't worry about it. Those who collected the most stones were the brothers alongside Hastel. They exchanged the stones for swords and shields, while Hastel took a breastplate and a joint. Gilly and Anna managed a little less, and exchanged for a bow and arrow with a cloak and a staff with a brooch. Lorraine and Rouge got a dagger and a shield. In the end, everyone had good results. And finally, Alec exchanged his own stones for what he wanted. Thus, they were able to take their boat back home. For him, this was his first trip with a real and vivid body. Because he had always been sick as a child, his dream had always been to run with his friends. The game Chronicles of Discard allowed him to experience adventures virtually. Now, Alec had made amazing friends, and even though he lost other things, he gained a lot too. These were all precious memories for him. It was quite fun. Everything was so peaceful that it almost scared him. While he thinks, Henrietta appears, asking if something happened. She was worried because Alec was crying alone on the deck. The young man didn't even realize he was so emotional and tries to explain himself, easing the princess's worries. Alec tells her it was just because he was enjoying the trip too much and didn't want it to end. This makes her laugh because it sounded like a child speaking, which embarrasses him, but it was kind of true. The protagonist remembers something and gifts Henrietta a necklace. He exchanged his stones for equipment and this item too. After all, she was left out while the others had fun. The girl thanks him and promises to take very good care of the gift, which makes Alec laugh because she was being a bit dramatic. Still, it was the first time Henrietta traveled and received a gift from a friend. Due to her position, she never went on family trips or had people close to her who treated her as an equal. Now that she had turned 18, she had many duties to fulfill as a noble's daughter. The protagonist reflects on this and remembers how much Julius loved his own daughter. Then, he himself says that they should return to this island in the future. If she wanted, they could travel again since the world was full of fun things to do. Being a gold-ranked clan, they could use the excuse of an escort to convince her father to allow the trip. This makes Henrietta laugh, even though they were direct words from his heart, even for comfort. Anna, on the other hand, was listening to this conversation and felt a bit tense. After that, the group returned to the city and said goodbye to the princess. They returned home and started unpacking their bags. Upon entering the house, they were greeted by Mary and a completely new butler. This guy was Gilbert, a new servant who appeared out of nowhere while they were away.